My son threw those hurtful words at me, declaring that being overweight was a disgrace, and contemptuously telling me to get lost like a pig. As the father of my grandchild, his audacity left me questioning how someone could utter such callous remarks to their own child. My grandchild, visibly affected but silent, looked down without responding. Although his face was hidden, I couldn't ignore the impact of those words on him. Stepping forward, I instinctively moved to shield my grandchild from the verbal assault. With determination, I announced that I would take him away, leaving the smirking couple behind as I walked away, holding my grandchild's hand. A month later, after discovering the true nature of my grandchild, the arrogant couple appeared, suggesting we go back together. My grandchild, puzzled for a moment, scoffed at them, asking, "Who are you guys?" and turned away. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Hannah Harrison, turning 81 this year. Back in my time, I was one of the rare cases of marrying for love, a decision opposed by our relatives. We eloped, navigating life together in a place where nobody knew us. Despite the challenges, we were blessed with a child. As our family grew, we faced the joy of raising our son and later welcoming a grandchild. As the years passed, our son brought home a girlfriend, and they married. A boy was born, and despite their initial reservations, they decided to go through with the pregnancy. I convinced them to raise their child, and my grandchild grew up well under my care. However, it became apparent that the couple had no interest in parenting. They neglected their child, prompting my frequent interventions. I scolded them, but it seemed to have no effect. One day, I found my grandchild caught in the middle of a heated argument between my son and his wife, both blaming each other for their family's mess. My grandchild, now 22, hadn't pursued higher education or taken significant steps since high school. Stubbornly staying at home, he seemed to be waiting silently for his parents' arguments to end. Their criticism of his unemployment, coupled with mocking remarks about his body shape, became unbearable. Unable to endure their exchange any longer, I intervened. Stepping between my son and his wife, I asserted, "Enough, both of you. How about going shopping with Grandma John?" Despite my attempt to offer a lifeline, my grandchild mumbled a soft reply and quickly fled to his room, seemingly escaping such a tense atmosphere. My daughter-in-law, snorting in response, muttered about our ungrateful son as she watched him retreat. Then, as if their earlier argument had been a facade, the couple mentioned having errands and promptly left. I took it upon myself to tidy up the untidy house. From a young age, my grandchild had not received much care, becoming increasingly reclusive due to constant sarcastic remarks from his parents. Concerned about his well-being, I occasionally visited to do some housekeeping and secretly look after him. While vacuuming near my grandchild's room, I knocked on the door multiple times. "John, haven't you had lunch yet?" "I made some. Would you like some?" Knowing his tendency to avoid leaving his room, especially when his parents were home, I hoped to entice him with a homemade lunch, something more nutritious than his usual fast food. After a brief pause, the door cracked open, and my grandchild peeked out. "I'll eat here, Grandma. Eat with me." With a satisfying snap, the door closed. I put away the vacuum cleaner with a content feeling and started preparing lunch. When I knocked on my grandson's room again, lunch in hand, the door promptly opened, and I was invited in. The room had a faint scent of grease, but it didn't bother me. I spread out the lunch on a small table without a care, and my grandson's face lit up as he watched. It warmed my heart to see expressions he only showed to me. As we finished lunch and chatted about trivial things, it seemed my son had returned home, making the entrance noisy. My grandson immediately lost his smile, becoming silent. It appeared our pleasant time was over when my son admonished, "Hey, Mom, don't leave trash at the entrance." My son's loud yell echoed through the door as he complained about the things I left behind, despite their own negligence in properly taking out the trash. Feeling sorry for my grandson, I decided it was time to head home. Even as I waved back and left the room, my son's yelling persisted. I shouted back for him to be quiet, and as I got ready to leave, my son continued his complaints. "You should take better care of your son, John. He's your child, after all," I remarked, Shut up. If he was a girl, I would. What's wrong with having a boy? Can't dress him in cute clothes and show him off? Really, what kind of reasoning is that? I spat out my retort, grabbed the trash bag, and left my son and daughter-in-law's house. Walking away and glancing back, I saw my grandson watching me from a second-floor window. He noticed me, waved again, and I reciprocated before heading home. It had been a while since my last visit due to a busy schedule, but I decided to go to my son's house again. As I approached the entrance, I could hear my son and his wife arguing, the noise carrying outside. Sighing, I opened the door and the yelling intensified. You know, keeping your hair long and covering your face doesn't change the fact that you're overweight. Being overweight is a disgrace. Get lost, pig. Beam is shut and who does nothing but trouble. Just get out already. When I inquired about what was going on today, my son and his wife both pointed at my grandson. He started talking back to us after all we've done raising him. He repays us with defiance. I turned to my grandson, surprised by his defiance, as he glanced at me but quickly glared back at his parents. Despite being spoken down to, he stood his ground firmly, not willing to back down. I stared at him with my mouth open, taken aback by this unexpected turn of events. You don't work, but you're always relying on our money. If you have time to spend money on your pointless hobbies, why don't you go back to school? Yeah, we're fed up with you eating into the money we earn. If you're going to continue to be a burden, then please leave. My grandson, being told to leave by his parents and having no job or place to go, probably wanted nothing more than to leave this house. However, he couldn't, and he couldn't even argue back. He just glared at them, biting his lip. You can't do it, can you? Of course, you've always relied on her money. Frustration welled up in my grandson, clenching his fists. He looked like he was on the verge of exploding with anger. Then I declared, John will be living with me. My statement brought silence. My son and his wife stopped yelling, and my grandson stared at me in shock. Addressing all three of them, I said, I can't believe you tell your own child to leave. I wanted to do this sooner but didn't interfere, thinking it was better for him to be with his family. I couldn't bear to witness my dear grandson being mistreated any longer. Without hesitation, I announced, if he has nowhere to go, he can come to my house. John, pack your bags and come with me. My grandson seemingly snapped out of his shock, swiftly ran to his room. Surprised by this unexpected turn, my son and his wife, though happy to be rid of the problem, didn't intervene. Instead, they smirked. After a while, my grandson emerged with his bags packed. Ignoring the sneers from my son and daughter-in-law, I left the house with my grandson following closely behind. So began our journey of living together. Silent during the ride to my house, my grandson held onto the lunch I had given him, following me closely. Upon arrival, he left his luggage somewhat aside and entered the living room, holding only the lunch. From now on, he would be living in the house I currently inhabited alone. John must have lunch for now, I called out while preparing dishes in the kitchen. My grandson, who had been aimlessly looking around the living room, nodded slightly and began laying out the lunch on the kitchen table. After everything was ready, we put our hands together and said grace before eating. My grandson followed suit, and we finished our meal without much conversation. As I began cleaning up, my grandson seemed unsure whether to help. Gently declining his offer, I said, John, I'll give you any room you like on the second floor. Go see which one you'd prefer. Rarely coming out of his shell since childhood, exploring our house must have felt like a new experience for him. After finishing the cleaning, I sat down to drink coffee, hearing him exploring the second floor. After a while, he came down the stairs and peeked through the living room door with a small smile. Grandma, I like the corner room. I smiled and nodded, allowing him to use it however he liked. The room was once my husband's study, now empty but still holding a large desk and bookshelves. Pleased that my grandson liked the same room, he began unpacking his belongings right away. Wanting him to enjoy his free time, I decided to relax in the living room as it got dark outside. While preparing dinner, I thought about getting his new sleeping area ready and went upstairs to call him when dinner was ready. John, dinner's ready. Come on down. My grandson, deeply engrossed in drawing, forgot to turn on the light in his room, leaving the canvas in the dark. In the center of the room, a large Gerber daisy was illuminated by a streetlight. Even without the bias of him being my grandson, it was a captivating sight. My grandson started to make an effort, as if reaching for something he had never had before. Now, with what face had my son and his wife come here? Still smirking as usual, they finally broached the inevitable topic. You must be tired of living here by now. You can come back to us if you want. We thought you want to live as a family of 3 again, so we came to pick you up. We'll buy you all the art supplies you need. You don't have to stay here anymore. Let's go back together, shall we? Did they really think he would accept their offer after ridiculing his interests, treating him poorly just because he wasn't the daughter they wanted? Despite the awful things they had said and essentially kicking him out, now that he had found success away from them, they decided it was time to welcome him back. The audacity boiled my blood. My grandson, likely feeling the same, clenched his fists, glaring at them the entire time. Just as I began to worry it might turn into a physical altercation, he relaxed his shoulders, unclenched his fists, crossed his arms, and scoffed at them. "Ha! Who are you guys?" We were all taken aback by his response. My son and his wife looked at each other. After kicking me out just because I wasn't a girl, and now you come back just because I appeared on TV? Really shows what kind of people you are, my grandson continued, mimicking my son and his wife's insensitive laughter. He let loose, giving them a piece of his mind, having been subjected to their sarcasm since he could remember. He didn't stop until he had said everything he could think of, then heaved a big sigh. That's the deal. I'm not going back, and I don't want to. As my grandson made his stance clear, my son and his wife, their faces turning red with anger, were about to explode when a familiar voice intervened. I'd like to hear more about this story. Turning around, they saw the man who had helped with my grandson's exhibition, followed by reporters scheduled for today's magazine interview. They all pointed their voice records our way, having recorded the entire exchange. Seeing the reporters' involvement, my son and his wife tried to flee with their faces contorted. However, the reporters and neighbors who had crowded the entrance wouldn't let them, and in the end, they couldn't escape. They were forced to watch as we proceeded with the interviews. A few days later, the incident made the news and was featured in a magazine article of considerable size. We arranged for a lawyer, and a restraining order was issued against my son and his wife. They've been troubled by daily reprimands over the phone and cold looks from the neighbors. Now they can no longer approach my grandson. It's their punishment for trying to manipulate him for their own convenience. My grandson has continued his art and diet as if nothing had happened. It seems like lifting the emotional burden has inspired him to face everything more positively. As for me, I've received several paintings from my grandson since then and even gave an interview about discovering his talent. Now, I'm leisurely sipping coffee while watching a documentary featuring my grandson. Occasionally, I can't help but smile as I gaze at the Gerber painting in the living room, which stands out among the rest. The man asked me to sell him the painting, but that's one request I cannot fulfill. It's a precious treasure my grandson gave me for the first time. It was truly a beautiful painting. The room now carried a stronger scent of oil paint than it ever did back at my son and his wife's place. John had a hobby of oil painting. "Grandma, this is for you," he said, presenting a canvas featuring a large orange Gerber daisy against a backdrop of a clear blue sky with thin clouds. Yet it wasn't just that. The corners were tinged with the colors of sunset, giving the impression that evening was approaching. It was a wonderfully crafted painting. While I knew of my grandson's hobby, I had never seen his work before. I was surprised by his talent upon this first encounter. The man nodded in agreement, and I welcomed him into our home. A month after that incident, my grandson was preparing for his own art exhibition. It turned out that the man who approached us in the yard owned an art gallery and had become interested after seeing me admiring my grandson's paintings. Intrigued by the joy with which I gazed at the walls adorned with numerous paintings, he expressed a desire to learn more about the art. Before we knew it, arrangements were made, and today, my grandson's exhibition was finally opening. The man even reached out to television stations, and a local news program came to cover the event. My grandson, although very shy with all the attention, seemed pleased to be praised by so many people. The exhibition was a huge success, boosting my grandson's confidence and inspiring him to create even more paintings. I thought we were set for a smooth sail from here on, but then an unexpected visitor showed up. Someone visited our house, and thinking it was about time for a visit, I went to answer the door without checking who it was. To my surprise, my son and his wife stood there smirking down at me. Feeling nothing but disgust towards them, I was speechless. "Mom, it's been a while. We thought it might be getting tough for you to take care of John, so we've come to take him back. Sorry for the trouble. He can be quite a handful, can't he?" Their insincere tone was evident, and I stood there dumbfounded. My grandson, who had been working on his art late into the night, yawned as he headed towards the living room upon hearing the commotion. "Grandma, is it that time already?" he asked. To spike his tiredness, he quickly walked towards me, positioning himself between us and his parents. Seeing this, my son and his wife looked surprised. "John, have you lost weight?" My son commented. "Not dramatically, but yeah, you've slimmed down." Indeed, my grandson had lost some weight since moving in with me. The poor diet and unhealthy lifestyle he had led to weight gain, but since living with me and focusing on his art, he stopped snacking and ate balanced meals. He gradually became healthier, and though he tried to hide it, I knew he sneaked out to run in the middle of the night since leaving his parents' house. "You don't want it, right?" my grandson asked, noticing my silence. He slumped his shoulders as he stood up. "It's a bit smelly from the paint. I'll open the window to ventilate, so you go ahead downstairs." "Are you sure I can have such a wonderful painting?" I approached the artwork and looked at it intently. Unable to contain my emotions, I couldn't help but cry. Embracing my flustered grandson, I thanked him repeatedly. The painting quickly became my favorite, hanging proudly in the living room. Every day I admired it, initially making John embarrassed and shy. However, with my continuous praise, he gradually started to smile happily. He confessed that he had never been praised before, and my enthusiastic compliments seemed to inspire him to create more. Each finished piece received praise and a spot in our living room gallery. One day, as I was sipping coffee in the living room and admiring the paintings, a voice came from the garden. "You have a lovely home. Do you like paintings?" Turning towards the voice, I noticed a man who seemed interested in John's artwork. "I don't know about paintings in general, but I love my grandson's paintings. All of these were done by him," I replied, thrilled that someone was interested. I hurried outside to chat with the man. Most of what I said turned into bragging, but he listened intently, nodding along. We talked for quite a while. Eventually, my grandson, who had gone out to buy art supplies, returned and had to interrupt our conversation. Pleased with the man's interest, I introduced my grandson to him and invited him to join us for dinner, if he'd like. Despite his shyness, my grandson looked a bit reluctant but agreed. Upon laying eyes on my sister-in-law for the first time, my initial impression was that she exuded an overwhelming charm, boasting remarkable features. "Greetings, Catherine here. Pleasure to meet you," she chimed in with an air of sophistication. Despite my initial desire to form a connection with her, that sentiment rapidly dissipated in the ensuing moment. "Who's this elderly lady? Is she my brother's wife's mom?" The ambience took a turn for the tense when my sister-in-law not only cut short my salutations, but also dubbed me an old lady. From that day forward, my days took a turn for the nightmarish. "My name is Catherine Johnson, a mundane 30-year-old housewife. 4 years ago, I was a career-oriented woman, immersed in my professional endeavors. No need to brag, but my popularity at the office was undeniable. I garnered accomplishments, admiration from subordinates, superiors, and clients alike. My husband, Bob, was among those who admired me. Our friendship blossomed from business meetings, sparked at a party hosted by Bob's company. He wanted to verify the rumors about me firsthand and decided to join a business meeting. Initially skeptical, he fell for my robust core and way of life. He believed I was the one for him. When I learned about Bob's determination to win my affection, I found it endearing, like something out of a high school romance. Little did I confess, I had a secret crush on him too. Bob's striking features and popularity among women made him my type. After numerous dates, we married, and our married life was an idyllic journey. Each morning, as I prepared breakfast, Bob would wake with a gentle smile, uttering a warm good morning and enveloping me in a hug. It became a cherished daily ritual. Despite his older age, his childlike behavior stirred my maternal instincts. Furthermore, Bob and I never quarreled. He remained unfazed even when I accidentally broke a cherished plate. His concern was more for me than the broken piece. His kindness never ceases to amaze me. Both of us yearned for a child, prompting me to leave my job to focus on starting a family. A child born of Bob and me was destined to be adorable. I found myself immersed in constant contemplation of names, especially if we were blessed with a girl. Time swiftly passed, and this year marked our third anniversary. Although we hadn't been blessed with a child, our happiness remained intact, save for one aspect: Bob's family home. Bob's mother and younger sister occupied his family home, as his father had succumbed to cancer before our marriage. His mother, always cheerful, had been exceptionally kind to me. I attributed Bob's kindness to his mother. However, his sister was an entirely different story, and my dislike for her traced back to the time of our first meeting. Reflecting on that introduction, my initial impression of her was of a charming person with striking features akin to Bob. Fleetingly, I entertained the notion of getting along with her, but that sentiment dissipated instantly. "Nice to meet you. I'm Catherine," I greeted upon our first encounter. However, she promptly interrupted, disdainfully questioning, "Who's this old lady? Is she my brother's wife's mom?" The atmosphere turned icy when she labeled me an old lady, and my attempts at cordiality were met with cold indifference. My sister-in-law didn't bother reciprocating the greeting, prompting Bob to step in with a sarcastic introduction. Her response was one of feigned surprise, questioning my age with a condescending tone. 27? No way. Seriously, that's hilarious. I thought you were like 50. You really look old. Her comments were outrageously out of line, leaving me genuinely questioning her relation to Bob. She unabashedly scrutinized me from head to toe, making snide remarks about my appearance. "Your clothes are so out of style, you're overweight, your nails are unkempt," and more. In response, I silently observed, Bob's hands trembling with suppressed rage. Eventually, he snapped, a rare occurrence, admonishing her for her extremely rude behavior. Her retort was dismissive. You're so annoying." Totally killed the mood. Her blatant nastiness extended beyond me, as she would make similar snide comments to both Bob and their mother. Despite enduring her behavior for years, Bob and his mother apologized to me for her unwarranted actions. Later on, despite them not being at fault, they continued to apologize. I felt sympathy for them, yet anger simmered towards my sister-in-law for her hurtful remarks to her own family. To minimize contact, I decided to cease visiting Bob's family home. Information about my sister-in-law trickled through their mother, but she hadn't caused any harm directly, so I continued living my life peacefully. However, a single incident shattered my content daily routine. Bob's mother approached us with a favor. She planned to move to a senior housing facility with assistance in 6 months due to a back injury. It was evident that my sister-in-law was to blame, as she wouldn't lift a finger to help their already frail mother, making her carry heavy bags. Despite the mother's deteriorating health, she wouldn't kick out her daughter, a testament to a mother's boundless love. Although I was willing to support the mother, the catch was living with the sister-in-law, a prospect I dreaded. Unfortunately, for the sake of the mother's health, I reluctantly accepted that the sister-in-law would come with the package. As anticipated, living together became a nightmare from morning till night. My sister-in-law spewed venom, especially towards me. Criticizing my cooking, she'd declare, "This tastes so bad. How can you even make such trash? You're weirdly talented." Even when folding her clothes, she'd find fault and demand proper ironing. Her attitude resembled that of a rebellious teenager. During room cleaning, her sharp comments persisted. "Hey, there's still dust over there. You're pretty much the maid here, so do it right. You're so useless." Despite her inactivity, she never hesitated to point out flaws. I silently yearned for an escape from this hell. As I continued cleaning, she added insults about Bob's apparent inability to manage household chores, suggesting we should have a child. Infuriated, I couldn't let that comment slide, breaking my silence. The situation was too much to bear, but I refrained from saying anything more, almost paralyzed by the terrifying look on my sister-in-law's face. It felt as if she regarded me with utter disgust, and the pressure was so intense that I involuntarily looked down, overwhelmed with fear and a sense of impending doom. The emotions swirled inside me, and all I could manage was holding back the tears. My sister-in-law left the room with a smug laugh, leaving me shaken. On another day, she returned home in a great mood, boasting about her boyfriend's proposal. She proudly described him as tall, handsome, and high-earning. In a brazen move, she approached me, mocking my inability to have children. "Losers like you should fulfill their roles as women by having kids," she sneered. The familiarity of her mocking tone was shocking. She didn't spare Bob and my mother-in-law, provoking Bob's anger. Nauseated, I rushed to the bathroom, oblivious to her parting insult. In the living room, I could hear a heated argument between Bob and my sister-in-law, while my mother-in-law comforted me, emphasizing that children are a blessing, and the decision was up to Bob and me. With tears in her eyes, she tried to provide solace, expressing her hope that my sister-in-law would marry and leave as soon as possible. On another day, after a routine OBGYN visit, I took a detour to a popular flower shop nearby. There I bumped into an old colleague, Steve, who still looked up to me despite my departure from our old job. We chatted about work matters and caught up after 3 years. Steve happily shared his plans to marry his girlfriend later that day. Intrigued about his presence at the flower shop, I soon discovered the reason. Steve handed me a bouquet of baby's breath, explaining that its meaning was gratitude and happiness. He expressed his gratitude for our past interactions and hoped I'd continue to be there for him. Touched by his warmth, I hurried home, eager to share this uplifting encounter with my husband. Upon reaching home, I found my sister-in-law absent. Seizing the moment, I placed the baby's breath in a vase and, with my mother-in-law, prepared dinner, grateful for the unexpected joy brought by a simple bouquet. The peaceful and joyful atmosphere prevailed with my sister-in-law gone, allowing my mother-in-law and me some quality time watching her favorite TV show. That night, I shared the day's events with my husband, and we went to bed with smiles on our faces. However, the next morning, my sister-in-law returned home with a bouquet of roses, which she casually threw at me, instructing me to put them in a vase before retiring to her room. As I tried to put the bouquet in a vase, I realized most flowers were broken or torn, likely mishandled by my sister-in-law. She later approached, declaring her plans to bring her boyfriend over on Saturday and instructing me to dress decently. Her condescending remarks irked me, but the thought of her imminent departure provided some relief. On the scheduled day, Bob and I were out shopping as per my sister-in-law's request. When we returned, the living room buzzed with activity. Upon greeting them, my sister-in-law glared at me, and accidental eye contact with her fiancé resulted in her disapproval. She snapped at me, asking to refresh the tea. As I served tea, she continued her taunts, deliberately spilling the freshly poured beverage on the floor. Bob and I quickly cleaned up, but the atmosphere remained tense. Even her fiancé tried to defend me, but my sister-in-law dismissed him, claiming I was just the maid. The tension escalated, and her fiancé uttered the unexpected, "Let's break up." It turned out he was Steve, my old colleague, and the roses she brought home were the ones he had gifted me just days ago. Steve exposed my sister-in-law's lies, revealing his respect for me and apologizing for the baby's breath flower comment. The room fell into disappointment, with my husband glaring at my sister-in-law. In her panic, she desperately sought support from me, pulling on my collar. I firmly shook off her hand, refusing to tolerate her snide remarks any longer. After enduring my sister-in-law's relentless bullying, I finally let my emotions loose. I firmly told her not to come to me for help after all she had done. In a surprising turn, I revealed that it wasn't me who had fertility issues but Bob. He had overcome male infertility, and I was carrying our baby. Enraged at my sister-in-law's comments, Bob demanded an immediate apology and poured tea over her head. For the first time, my sister-in-law was startled and fell on her butt as Bob recounted the truth. Seeking support, she clung to my mother-in-law, but even she had reached her limit. My mother-in-law abandoned her daughter, declaring her the worst and ungrateful. As my sister-in-law ran to her room crying, Steve said he would contact us later and left the house. My mother-in-law hugged me, acknowledging the challenges I had endured, and cried with joy upon learning about my pregnancy. Bob apologized for not protecting me properly, and although it was a tumultuous few minutes, I felt refreshed after expressing my feelings to my sister-in-law. Later, my mother-in-law moved to a senior living community, and the family home was sold. Bob and I decided to move closer to her, wanting her to witness our child's growth. I haven't heard anything about my sister-in-law since. Bob forcefully threw her out of the house, and nobody knows her whereabouts. Steve sent a text mentioning a letter and flowers, explaining that he had cut ties with my sister-in-law after discovering her infidelity. In the letter, he expressed his gratitude and sincere apologies. Despite the challenging circumstances, I found unexpected relief and learned that actions, whether good or bad, come back to oneself based on how they treat others. I hope my child will grow up with compassion and understanding. My account better have a minimum of $50,000 in it, considering the hefty withdrawals made over the last 6 months. I've been suspicious of unauthorized transactions and reported my concerns to the bank. To catch the culprit, I decided to set up a trap after consulting with them. Astonishingly, my suspicions pointed towards my husband and sister-in-law. It's been 2 years since I tied the knot with my husband, but my inclination to divorce him grows every day. The compatibility with his family is abysmal. His folks consist of a salaried father, a part-time working mother, and a sister with her husband and 3 kids, just a short 5-minute stroll away. On the contrary, my husband and I, both working full-time with no kids, live in an apartment an hour's drive from his parents' place. During our family introduction, I thought we'd get along well. The family banter seemed friendly, with me being playfully teased and praised. We got married, had a satisfying wedding, and even went on a honeymoon to Taiwan. However, things took a turn when we encountered an elderly American man at breakfast. I offered him my unused coupon, but my husband reacted coldly, calling the man a beggar. It sparked a cold war between us that continued after returning from JFK. I didn't want an immediate divorce, but the growing discontent within me suggests otherwise. The flight back had me on edge about our future, and sure enough, our married life was marred by issues stirred up by my sister-in-law. Just before our wedding, she, 3 months pregnant with twins, asked my husband for my contact information, claiming she had something important to discuss. Puzzled, I hesitated, but my husband decided to share my details without consulting me. The next day, my sister-in-law, considering us family, asserted that I should be a great help in raising her 3 children. She insisted it's tough being a stay-at-home wife all day. You'll understand, right? She even added, keep yourself available for about 1.5 years. I protested, stating my busy remote work schedule. Dismissing me, she laughed and said it's just a bit more than a side job. When I confronted my husband, he sided with his sister, claiming that as family, there's no need for formal requests. Frustrated, I suggested involving other family members, but he insisted it's too late for that. I was tasked with taking the older kid to and from school, a 1-hour drive each way from our home to my sister-in-law's. Despite the impracticality and my objections, my husband remained adamant. To make matters worse, he smugly remarked, "You're the superhero, so naturally, you'll help my troubled sister, right?" Fed up with his persistence, I visited my in-laws the next day and firmly refused any involvement with my sister-in-law's requests. The following day, she asked me to handle the nephew's pickup and drop-off, but I stood my ground, citing work commitments and the impractical distance. To my surprise, my in-laws became infuriated, questioning my compassion and whether my parents taught me anything. They asserted that a wife is meant to serve her husband, his parents, and his sister, living in devoted service to the ancestors. It was a shocking revelation, and they emphasized the disgrace they felt in my actions. Upon witnessing my reaction, my in-laws seemed to grasp my error and reluctantly said, "As long as you understand, make sure you fulfill your duties as a wife." The assistance from my husband's family, including my husband himself, persisted for a year and a half. However, this commitment would consume over 4 hours in total for a round trip, significantly impacting my work. When I communicated this issue to my husband, who was unwilling to sacrifice disposable income, he managed to persuade his family to accept my condition of only helping out for the first month after the birth. After that period elapsed, my sister-in-law began bringing her 3 children to our house every weekend. The consequences were apparent: water wastage, air conditioning running in all rooms, an emptied fridge, excessive tissue use, and consistently depleted toilet paper. To make matters worse, my jewelry went missing, and my sister-in-law started taking my car without asking, going out on her own. When I confronted her about borrowing my car, I emphasized that she should have at least informed me, pointing out that my insurance didn't cover accidents caused by anyone other than myself. But she remained stubborn, refusing to listen. What's worse, my car already had scratches and dents from her use. Worried about a potential accident, I messaged my sister-in-law's husband, who had previously been unresponsive to spite notifications. To my dismay, the situation escalated as both my husband and sister-in-law started leaving their kids with me to go out more frequently. During this time, I found myself juggling household chores accumulated over the weekdays while caring for 3 unfamiliar children. One particular weekend, my sister-in-law left her kids with me and went out with my husband. However, when she finally returned on Monday morning after my husband went to work, I went to the bank and was shocked to find my balance had plummeted to a single digit. There should have been $50,000 in this account. Upon closer inspection, substantial amounts of money had been withdrawn multiple times over the past 6 months. Suspecting unauthorized withdrawals, I reported my concerns to the bank and decided it was time to set up a trap to catch the perpetrator. The following weekend, as per usual, my sister-in-law imposed childcare duties on me and left with my husband. Moreover, on that day, my in-laws embarked on a one-night trip, leaving me with parting words: "Take this as a learning opportunity for future childcare. You're lucky to learn this for free." Such remarks stung. The afternoon after they left, my phone buzzed incessantly with calls, and ignoring them led to messages flooding my inbox on various social media platforms. Reluctantly answering the phone, I was met with a loud voice complaining, "I can't withdraw money. What's going on?" Feeling a sense of victory, I inquired about the issue. My sister-in-law shouted back, I can't withdraw money from your bank account. We can't even pay for our lodging." Calmly, I questioned why she assumed she could use my account without asking. In response, she hurled curses, and my husband intervened, explaining that due to a shortage of funds, they didn't have enough credit limit for the trip and decided to pay in cash. Coldly, I asked whose bank account it was, pointing out that it was mine. The line fell silent. My husband finally said it didn't matter, and if they couldn't pay, they wouldn't be able to check out or even afford the train fare home. Behind him, the in-laws suggested transferring some money to my husband's account, insisting we discuss it when they returned. Astonished by their audacity, I firmly replied, "I can't do that. I have to go to the police." Silence hung on the other side of the phone. After a long pause, my sister-in-law exclaimed in disbelief, "Police? Why? It's normal to file a report if someone is withdrawing money from your account without permission." I laughed and explained, "You're our daughter-in-law. Whatever belongs to the daughter-in-law is for the family's use. You don't even understand that." When my father-in-law argued that family members can't commit theft against each other due to some familial exemption, suggesting that theft among family members can't be prosecuted, I quickly countered, I clarified that my sister-in-law and I are not cohabiting relatives, rendering that exemption irrelevant. My father-in-law was left speechless when my husband asked if I intended to sue his sister. I informed him that as a victim, legal action was indeed on the table. Certainly, I would pursue legal action and consult on the theft of my jewelry and other items taken by my sister-in-law. She interrupted, questioning if there was any evidence, but I had already identified her flea market app account, where records of her selling stolen items from me were preserved, including some with photos of warranty cards, unmistakably proving they were mine. She began crying upon learning this. When my husband became angry and insisted I apologize to his sister, I stood firm. I explained that as a superhero, I couldn't overlook wrongdoing. I also informed him that I was preparing for a divorce and that there would be a proper settlement for alimony and property division. In response, he mocked me, refusing to pay any alimony. However, I had records and witnesses attesting to how my marriage had become untenable due to his and his family's actions. When I hinted at exposing everything in court, my husband questioned what I meant. Suddenly, a person in the passenger seat connected to the car's speakerphone revealed themselves. They claimed to be observing and listening to all the misdeeds as a family member. This revelation shocked everyone, providing a potential witness to the unfolding drama. To uncover the unauthorized money withdrawals, the bank suggested that if the transaction history wasn't recorded in the passbook, it was likely someone with access to the cash card and PIN, usually a family member, was responsible. I devised a plan intentionally leaving a bank statement showing a transfer of about $3,000 in a conspicuous place while changing the PIN. This was meant to lock the cash card after 3 failed attempts by my sister-in-law, effectively setting a trap. Additionally, I strategically left a brochure for an inn that only accepted cash payments within earshot of my sister-in-law. Observing her and my husband's reaction, I inwardly relished the success of my plan. I took action by sending a detailed message and photos to my sister-in-law's husband, exposing how she dumped her kids on me, the unsanitary conditions at her house when I wasn't caring for the children, and how the in-laws condoned it without reprimanding her. He quickly responded, having taken leave from his company citing a family emergency. He harbored various grievances and suspicions towards his wife's treatment of their children, but was silenced by her threats of divorce without custody. Together, my sister-in-law's husband and I cooperated, each hiring lawyers. I sought reimbursement for the embezzled money, compensation for my stolen items, alimony, and property division. As my sister-in-law's husband calmly explained the situation, my sister-in-law was shrieking on the other end of the phone, and my husband warned that they couldn't get away with this for free. Unfazed, I revealed my investigation findings, informing them that both my husband and sister-in-law were dumping their kids on me while spending their time in nightclubs and bars. I expressed my disappointment in their actions, emphasizing that it was worse than I had imagined. I informed my husband that my belongings had already been moved out of the apartment. Since the apartment was considered company housing by my employer, a cleaning crew would be coming in soon, and he needed to leave promptly. I then handed the conversation back to my sister-in-law's husband. He calmly stated that he would be taking the children to his parents' house, and my sister-in-law would not be allowed to see them. He also mentioned that he would be selling the house, which was in his name, and she needed to move out immediately. We blocked all communication with them. Despite their attempts to reconcile and avoid divorce, they couldn't check out of their lodging without paying the bill. Eventually, the in-laws were reported to the police for suspected dine and dashed and lodging without payment. After being scolded by the police, they promised to pay upon returning home. As promised, they made their way back using regular trains. I left only the divorce papers, and the in-laws found their homes empty. Thanks to competent lawyers, I received a lump sum for alimony, and both my sister-in-law's husband and I finalized our divorces. He successfully gained custody of the children. At the behest of my ex-husband and ex-sister-in-law, the former in-laws had to sell their home to cover the alimony and embezzled money, becoming guarantors for the new debts incurred by the ex-sister-in-law and ex-husband. Furthermore, their debts at the nightclubs and bars became so substantial that they had to work tirelessly day and night to repay them. As for me, I decided to take a break from marriage for a while. My plan was to focus on taking care of myself and making up for the time wasted with my ex-husband.
Too bad. My mother-in-law sneered as I walked in from work. I couldn't believe it. The front door of my childhood home wouldn't budge. "Huh, it won't open," I muttered, attempting to unlock it with no success. Maybe the key was facing the wrong way? I tried again, but the locks had been changed. I was locked out, dumbfounded. Glancing up, I caught my mother-in-law smirking. "Tough luck," she said, reveling in my predicament. That's when my frustration erupted like a volcano. Anger surged through me, but I knew reacting impulsively wouldn't help. Taking a deep breath, I composed myself. I wouldn't let her get away with this. Silently fuming, I glared at her, a form of resistance. "I'm Linda, 40 years old, a regular housewife with a part-time cashier job. My husband James is 35, 5 years my junior. We got married 2 years ago after being introduced by a friend, and we don't have kids yet. James often travels for work, sometimes for months. Our peaceful married life was disrupted when my mother-in-law found out. I never expected her to be so vindictive, turning our days into a roller coaster. At one point, she insisted on living with us. James refused, but she persisted, causing him stress. Over dinner, he'd say things like, 'Again today,' with a strange smile. I felt guilty, thinking I was the cause of this added stress on him. There was a solid reason behind James consistently turning down his mother's request to move in with us. She and I didn't exactly see eye to eye. Back in my mid-20s, I faced a health issue related to female reproductive health and had to undergo surgery to remove one of my fallopian tubes. When I disclosed this to James, he responded with a perspective that still resonates with me today. "I'm not with you just because I want kids," he said, acknowledging that with only one fallopian tube, my chances of conceiving were about half that of the average woman. Despite being over 35, we agreed that children are a blessing, and we would let it happen naturally. However, my mother-in-law, right from our first introduction, hinted at wanting grandchildren. She insisted that we needed to act fast and would bring over people, including a seasoned midwife and a woman who had a child at an older age, to lecture us on pregnancy and childbirth. The pressure she imposed made me sick multiple times, with high fevers, migraines, and recurring stomach aches. James, witnessing my suffering, confronted his mother, and her nagging stopped, at least temporarily. His father had passed away a few months before our marriage talks, and she might have been reaching out to distract herself from loneliness. Knowing all this, James consistently refused her offers to live with us, understanding how stressful it would be for me. Yet one day, she showed up unannounced, having followed me from my workplace. James, furious, confronted her, but she acted as if nothing happened, bringing a large suitcase with her. I nervously asked if that suitcase was, by any chance, packed with her stuff. As expected, she confirmed it. I couldn't shake off the feeling that, given her proactive nature, this unexpected visit might lead to us living together. Judging by the increasingly stern look on James' face, it seemed he shared the same concern. Ignoring our apprehension, my mother-in-law delved into her suitcase, revealing some documents to James. The color drained from his face as he stared at them. "Mom, what do you mean you've terminated your apartment lease?" James exclaimed, leaving me too shocked to utter a word. It was beyond unexpected for her to give up her own apartment. Now, it seemed we had no choice but to let her stay. As we exchanged worried glances, she calmly stated, "If things go on like this, I'll end up homeless. With my husband gone and James being my only child, what'll I do if I'm left out in the cold?" Though she sneaked glances our way, it was evident she was doing this on purpose, fully aware that we had no option but to agree. Annoyance sparked within me, but I hid it, responding with a forced smile. Sensing my resignation, James sighed and reluctantly led his mother into our home. "We didn't want to create a scene outside," considering the strong community ties, similar to Nebraska. She took advantage of that, loudly lamenting about becoming homeless, leaving us with no choice but to let her in. James held his forehead and apologized to me in a low voice, but I assured him there was no need for an apology. Glancing back at my mother-in-law, she barged into our home, scanning it as if sizing up her new territory. As if on cue, she swiped her finger over the shoe rack. Neither James nor I were neat freaks, and we usually cleaned over the weekend, since it was Friday night. We hadn't cleaned the shoe rack yet, so her finger came away dusty. She shot me an accusing glare, berating me for not being able to keep the house clean, despite her own apartment having its fair share of dust. It was clear she just wanted to pick a fight, and my shoulders trembled in response. While I wanted to retort right then and there, I've always been the type to hold my tongue. Understanding that upsetting her would cause more trouble, I kept my cool and apologized to navigate the situation. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of her nitpicking. Despite the natural quirks of our aging house, she complained about the hallway floor creaking and insisted we change our too-hard sofa. After all, this was mine and James's living space. If she was forcing her way into our lives, she should be the one to adapt to us, right? But she refused to see it that way. Every time James attempted to reason with her, she skillfully deflected with some excuse, from demanding expensive tea to insisting on having sweets always at hand. She became unbearable since moving in. Just a few days with her had me feeling down in the dumps. To make matters worse, a week after she moved in, James suddenly had to relocate for a little over a year for a client only he could handle. He looked down, clearly feeling guilty. I tried to cheer him up, promising to hold down the fort while he's away, and saw him off with a smile. That's when my mother-in-law really showed her true colors. She never complained when James was around, but that night she criticized the meal I made. I've thought this before, but your food is bland. Did you even use salt? And there aren't enough side dishes. This lacks in both nutrition and presentation, she commented, escalating from mere criticism to dumping the meals I cooked right in front of me into the trash as days went by. I tried to adjust the taste to her liking, but she seemed bent on tormenting me. In the end, I reverted to cooking the way I liked. Of course, she still complained, but if she's going to throw it away anyway, I might as well cook it how I like it. Angry at how I handled things, my mother-in-law started gossiping with the neighbors when I wasn't around, spreading nasty rumors about me, despite everything being a bunch of lies. Since the neighbors had known her since they were young, they brushed off her stories and often consoled me, saying, "Must be tough, huh?" That was the only silver lining. As the days went on, my spirit gradually wore down. I began mindlessly shuttling between work and home. A year passed since I started living with my mother-in-law. Lately, she started ignoring me, and the atmosphere at home became so oppressive that I decided to work full-time just to avoid seeing her as much as possible. Then one day after work, as I tried to unlock the front door, the key wouldn't fit. Wait, why won't it open? I thought, trying again. On closer inspection, I realized the locks had been changed. I was shocked. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be locked out of my own house. Suddenly, I felt someone watching. Glancing into the living room next to the entrance, there she was, my mother-in-law, with a sinister grin plastered on her face, looking right at me. "You're out of luck, aren't you?" she sneered. That was the last straw. I felt a volcanic eruption of anger surging from the depths of my heart, trying to take over. Knowing that acting impulsively wouldn't help, I took a deep breath to calm myself down. I wasn't going to let her have her way. Fuming inside, I shot her a dirty look. She probably expected me to break down, beg, and make a scene. Not going to happen. Quickly shifting gears, I turned on my heels and headed to a nearby motel. After informing them I'd be staying for a few days, I decided to use this place as my base. I didn't have many personal belongings, and the essentials I'd need could be easily bought. With that, I decided I didn't need to return home anytime soon and ignored all the calls and messages from my mother-in-law. Soon enough, I got a call from my husband James. I figured my mother-in-law probably spouted off some baseless rumors, so I thought I first had to clear up James's misunderstanding. However, it turned out that wasn't necessary. I heard from Mom, you ran off. She's the one causing trouble, right? I'm sorry, Linda. I wasn't around to help, and you've been through a lot. Can you tell me what happened while I was away? James said, his voice filled with concern. You're too kind. You probably kept quiet, not wanting to burden me, I replied, relieved. I explained everything to him. I intended to keep it brief, but before I knew it, an hour had passed. James listened quietly, occasionally nodding. When I finished, he simply said, I get it, and asked me to leave the rest to him. Within half an hour, my mother-in-law called. You made James mad at me. You probably talked behind my back, huh? You're such a nasty piece of work, she accused. That really got to me. All the emotions I'd held back during our time living together came rushing back. I took a deep breath and let it all out, confronting her with every feeling I had inside. I've only told the truth. Unlike you, I don't go around spreading lies to the neighbors or engage in sneaky, malicious behavior, I retorted. At my words, my mother-in-law was taken aback and fell silent. It seemed I hit a nerve, and after that, she threw nonsensical and emotional words at me. However, I let them all go in one ear and out the other, thinking in my heart, just keep talking. A week passed in a flash. I returned home after a long absence. The locks had been changed, so I couldn't enter directly. Reluctantly, I rang the doorbell. Suddenly, the front door was flung open, and my mother-in-law, looking like she'd seen a ghost, appeared. Though I hadn't seen her for just a week, she looked like she had lost weight. With little inheritance left from my father-in-law, all she had was a meager amount of savings. Her appearance told the tale of how little she truly had. The moment our eyes met, she shouted, Where have you been? I've been in such trouble because of you, you useless daughter-in-law. She seemed to have more to say but stopped mid-sentence when she noticed my husband James standing behind me. Huh? Why is James here? His work assignment isn't over yet, is it? She muttered. I didn't just decide to come home on a whim. My concerned husband took some days off and decided to come back, I explained. Seeing James's unexpected return, my mother-in-law looked visibly shaken. From her reaction, it was clear she had never shown this side of herself in front of James. He had some idea about what was going on from what I had told him. He was shocked to witness his mother's true nature firsthand. However, his shock quickly turned to anger, and he lashed out at her. There's no way I can continue working under these circumstances. The most important person to me is Linda. I work for my life with Linda, and if Linda is in trouble, of course, I'm gonna come back, especially if it's because of my own mother, James declared. My mother-in-law weakly denied it, but James cut her off, telling her not to make excuses. I jumped in after James. I've kept a diary of everything you did to me. James had already read it, and the diary contained more horrendous acts by my mother-in-law than he had imagined. He was appalled, I said. My mother-in-law looked away guiltily, muttering some excuse. Now is the time to speak my mind. I took a deep breath and told her, This house is inherited by me. It's not a place where you can do as you please. I want to live here with my husband. But you don't belong here, she protested. You didn't have to say it like that. She tried to argue, but I retorted, Isn't it clear that being vague doesn't work with you? After all, you always speak your mind. With me, it's only fair that I do the same. Defeated, she said nothing, shrinking back. Well, it's about time we settled this, I declared, taking another deep breath and deciding to tell her the truth. We've already started the process to sell this house. James and I decided to sell it right away. We're going to pack our things and have some friends move them to our new place, so you should start packing too. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law's eyes widened in shock. Actually, after being locked out of the house and confessing everything to my husband, I decided to take drastic measures and sell the house. My mother-in-law blamed me, asking why I went ahead with such a decision without consulting her. Why would I need her permission to sell the house? Since I inherited this house, even if he's my husband, he can't interfere. Inheritances are separate property, so even if we were to get divorced, it wouldn't be divided. It's something that's not included in the property division. To begin with, my mother-in-law has no right to say anything about this house. That's why I thought there was no need to consult her. I might have told her if we had a good relationship, but she forced us to live together and made life hard for me. Why should I be considerate to her? It's the house I live in with my husband, so I did check with him, and he backed me up, saying I could do whatever I liked. That's when I went to a real estate agent with a certain flyer and asked if they could sell it. Apparently, the properties around here are popular lately, and even if they're small, many people want to buy them. The real estate agent I visited also had a flyer saying they'd buy used properties, and after checking if ours could be sold, they were keen to buy it right away. There seems to be a couple around here who want to open a cafe, and my house is just the right size, easily accessible, and has parking, which is a plus. Normally, I'd ignore such flyers or talk, but given the situation, I wasn't in a position to be picky. As soon as I met with a couple interested in buying, they said they'd pay a good price, but wanted the house handed over within 2 or 3 weeks. I agreed immediately and told my husband about it. My husband found us a month-to-month apartment and said we could live there for a while. When we told my mother-in-law all of this, she was shocked, not expecting things to have progressed so far. Ignoring my mother-in-law, who had turned pale, we went inside the house and started packing. Being a minimalist and with a husband who often travels for work, we didn't have much to pack. In about 3 hours, all our belongings were packed in boxes and suitcases. Our friends helped us handle the heavy furniture and appliances. Before we knew it, dusk was upon us, and the western sky turned a deep red, accentuating the sorrow of my mother-in-law, who stood there lost in thought. Then we hopped in our car and headed to our temporary apartment. That evening, as expected, the phone rang with a call from my mother-in-law. I answered while my husband, James, was in the shower. I had an inkling about what she'd say, but I listened to her anyway. She had always been quite assertive with me, but given her current situation, she probably didn't have the spirit to act that way. She pleaded in a soft voice, like the whine of a mosquito. I apologize for everything I've done. It was all my fault. I never realized you, Linda, felt this way. I never intended. I'm sorry. Can we live together again? Her voice, trying to be sweet, made me feel uneasy. Did she really think she could win me over with just those words? I'm not that simple. If it had been a matter of a day or two, maybe a simple apology would suffice. But after enduring a year of mistreatment from her, there was no way I could forgive her for trying to sweep everything under the rug with just a sorry. Thinking that an apology like that would suffice just shows how shallow your thinking is. I have no intention of forgiving you. Both James and I are thinking of cutting ties with you. The phrase cutting ties seemed to panic her even more. She rambled on, trying to appease me, but it was too late. After all her attempts to sabotage me, involving others with her lies, the audacity of expecting forgiveness was just too much. Suddenly, James, fresh out of the shower, heard her voice and yelled into the phone. She let out a small cry and hung up. We didn't hear from her after that. I blocked her number immediately, and James just sighed in disbelief. She was already in deep trouble, but little did she know what was awaiting her. Some time passed, and the day to hand over the house approached. She seemed to be in a rush, packing her stuff. But apparently she hadn't finished. When she moved in, she only had 2 suitcases worth of belongings. However, after James moved for his job, she'd made a ton of purchases online and at yard sales. Considering she was spending so much, she probably had nearly drained her savings or even her husband's inheritance. Yet that spending had backfired. There was just too much stuff to pack. When James and I went to check on her, she yelled at us, her face red with anger. You two decided on this move. You have to take responsibility and find me a new place. But as I calmly revealed a shocking fact, her face changed from red to pale. Hey, mother-in-law, Did you really dip into our savings just because yours ran out and you used up your husband's inheritance? We had kept some cash aside for emergencies, and to think you actually stole it. And the neighbors mentioned seeing you with a young man. Family or not, there's a line between right and wrong. Recently, she'd been completely ostracized from the neighborhood. Of course, the reason was because she spread ridiculous rumors about me. She was no longer welcome at the local gossip sessions, but ironically, those very sessions were buzzing with talk about her. Apparently, even in her 60s, people had seen her buying gifts like bags and jewelry for a young man and holding hands with him in public. Talk about karma. When James heard about this, he couldn't help but smirk at the thought of his own mother, over 60, gallivanting around with a young guy. My father-in-law has already passed away, so there's no one to blame, but it sure doesn't leave a good impression. Whether she felt ashamed or just helpless, I confronted her and firmly said, "Give back the money you took." She took a step back, tried to make excuses about returning it later, but James suggested she should just withdraw it from an ATM now. She probably hadn't drained all her savings, and the cash we kept was just over $1,000. So she should have that much, right? Without a word of protest, she quietly withdrew the stolen money and handed it over. Then a couple, the buyers, showed up to finalize the transfer of the house. We had agreed that they would handle any items left in the house, so it wasn't a problem if she left a few things behind. They were actually pleased there were reusable items left, so we breathed a sigh of relief. Realizing she had no options left, she sank into despair, unlike I'd ever seen before, and shuffled away. Later, I heard she was found living on the streets and was picked up by the police. From the beginning, she seemingly intended for James to come get her, refusing to look for a place on her own. But given all that had transpired, James, having already consulted with a real estate agent, bluntly told her about a cheap apartment she could live in. She silently agreed, drenched in sweat, without any argument. This budget apartment, where she had to share a bathroom, laundry, and other amenities, seemed like hell for her. Back when she lived with us, she was well-fed and healthy, but now she's become skeletal and pitiful to look at. She's barely making ends meet with a part-time job, but her habit of spending on young men hasn't changed, and she's in debt. The interest keeps piling up, and she's reportedly in total despair. As for us, we later bought a new house. Once the issue with James' mother was settled, he went back to his temporary work assignment, finished his tasks there, and then got promoted, meaning no more work-related moves. And miraculously, I got pregnant in my 40s. I've heard it's not that uncommon these days to give birth in your 40s, which is a bit reassuring. I'm enjoying my ultrasound pictures and feeling the baby move, living each day to the fullest. I'm not in the mood for your nonsense, so back off. I won't be handing this child over to someone like you. It was a chilly evening, and news of a severe cold wave had been reported. I was rushing home when I spotted my niece on the way. Something was off about her, no jacket, holding it in her arms. Upon closer inspection, I couldn't believe she was holding a baby. Both looked thin, and their clothes were dirty. Where do you think you're going with a baby in this cold? I couldn't ignore my trembling niece, offering to let her rest at my house. She snapped at me, "Shut up. Who would go to your house?" Despite our strained relationship, I couldn't overlook their condition. I tried to invite them with a gentle tone and smile, but she staunchly refused, citing her distrust. As I attempted to persuade her, a car suddenly pulled up, and to my surprise, my husband stepped out. "Well, it can't be helped. I'll have to take you with us by force." Swiftly, he picked up my niece and the baby, urging me to get in. I protested his forceful actions, feeling like he was kidnapping them. However, he drove on without saying a word. Upon reaching the destination, I was left speechless. I'm Kelly, born and raised in an ordinary family, a 29-year-old housewife married to a man. I have a sister who is 2 years older. Our relationship wasn't bad when we were kids, but things changed after her marriage to a wealthy man. She became extravagant, looking down on us and boasting about her luxurious lifestyle every chance she got. How sad that we can only afford an apartment, while she revels in her big, beautiful house, thanks to her $2 million spending. I came face to face with my sister, who never missed an opportunity to flaunt her shopping sprees and elevated status, and it grated on my nerves. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. Enough already. I'm sick of hearing about your money obsession. I'm content with my life. Keep your opinions to yourself. My anger boiled, reaching the point where I felt like attacking her. But she just laughed it off, snorted, and casually said, "Oh, so you're jealous after all." How pitiful. Poor people's jealousy is really an ugly sight. Her nonchalant and contemptuous attitude fueled my deep-seated dislike for her. From that point on, her jabs only intensified. Even at family gatherings, she would maliciously put me and my husband down. "Is that all your husband makes?" "Nothing." "I guess you must be a worthless old contractor, huh? Because of that, you have to work part-time jobs too. Poor you. By the way, I heard your wedding was really average, mostly just a room full of family members. If you compare it, my own wedding was exquisite, huh? A grand event for 100 people, a stunning gown, a breathtaking venue, and the food was first-rate. If only you could have hitched your ride on a gold mine like me." Her greed even led her to try to snatch away my necklace, a singular high-end item that was a beloved gift from my husband on my birthday. She couldn't stand the idea that a poor woman like me had such a nice thing. "How dare a poor girl like you carry a big fashion brand name? It doesn't suit you at all. Actually, it's kind of depressing how that lovely necklace is wasted on you. It would look way better on me, so you might as well give it up." Fortunately, the necklace wasn't taken, but its chain was snapped, leaving me quietly weeping for the love marred by this act of sadism. From then on, I did everything to outright ignore my sister. Avoiding her meant distancing from her family as well. However, my brother-in-law, always occupied with work, spared us no help in our little heartbreaks. Our interactions consisted of trivial comments and tongue bites. Despite his stoic exterior, I regretfully found myself reading him as well in the wretched limelight of my opulent sister. Additionally, Susan, my sister's 9-year-old daughter, seemed to have inherited a certain distaste for us. Dripping the sweet family ordeal with typical fashion disdain, every meeting with my niece was met with glares and minimal response. I couldn't fathom what I had done to earn her dislike. When I converse with my niece, the distance between us feels palpable. Although there isn't a particular issue, being treated so coldly by her adds a layer of loneliness. I successfully severed ties with my sister and her family, but I still catch glimpses of my sister's activities through a neighbor who works part-time with me. News had recently reached me that my sister had welcomed her second child, and amidst the hectic life of parenting, she seemed to be happily indulging in her favorite brands. On what seemed like any other peaceful day, with no interactions with my sister, I encountered an unexpected incident. It was the dead of winter, and a severe cold wave was making headlines. Anticipating the snow, I headed to the nearby supermarket, walking briskly with my scarf covering up to my nose. During this cold day, I unexpectedly spotted my niece before she noticed me. Initially contemplating a quick exit, I couldn't ignore something odd about her. For some reason, she wasn't wearing her jacket but was cradling it in her arms. A closer look revealed she was holding a baby, both appearing thin and clad in dirty clothes. Her nose was bright red, and she walked carefully, clutching the jacket around the baby to shield it from the cold. Despite her apparent distress, she was shivering. Concerned, I called out to her, suggesting she come to my place to warm up. Startled by my voice, she jumped, and upon seeing me, she vehemently rejected the offer. "Shut up. Why would I go to someone like you?" Despite her strong rebuff, I couldn't overlook their condition under the cold sky. I persisted, urging her to warm up at my place briefly, promising to drive her home afterward. She continued to resist, adamant about protecting the child, and insisting she wouldn't hand the baby over to a person like me. Despite assuring her of my intentions, she refused to listen, clinging to her distrust. As I grappled with how to help them, a car unexpectedly pulled up beside us. To my surprise, my husband stepped out. With a resigned tone, he declared, "Well, it can't be helped. I'll have to take you with us by force." Without delay, he picked up my niece and the baby, urging me to get into the car. As we drove away, he reassured my niece, "Just stay calm, and I won't do anything bad. Please don't thrash about." My niece, subdued by the sudden turn of events or perhaps my husband's stern demeanor, now behaved quietly, though she looked dangerously pale. In the car, my husband assured us he wouldn't do anything harmful as we rushed to the hospital, where a bewildered nurse took my niece and the baby, caught in the unexpected situation. In the waiting room, I couldn't contain my curiosity and concern as I asked my husband, "What's all this about? Why were you there just now, and why rush to the hospital?" My tone carried a slight protest, questioning the forceful actions that felt almost like a kidnapping. In response, he gave me a wry smile. He explained, "It was pure coincidence that I was there. Just happened to pass by on my way back from work. I was curious about what you and Susan were arguing about. But more than that, I noticed Susan and the baby's faces were very pale. I just thought I had to get them to a warm place right away." Initially thinking any warm place, like our home, would do, he was shocked by the unusual lightness when he picked up my niece and the baby. Sensing something more than just the cold, he changed the destination from our home to the hospital, where they could receive appropriate care. Although startled by the abrupt car ride, I realized that if my husband hadn't arrived when he did, and it was just me, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. Reflecting on it, I felt grateful for my husband's actions, even if they were a bit forceful. After my niece and the baby's examination, the doctor informed us that they were both suffering from malnutrition and were now receiving IV drips while resting in warm beds. Apart from malnutrition, there didn't seem to be any other abnormalities, providing us with some relief. However, the doctor, suspecting potential abuse due to the circumstances, had already called the police about 10 minutes after the IV was finished, and Susan woke up. Talking to Susan later in the hospital, she was no longer in a state of complete refusal and could converse normally. According to her, my sister was away on a trip with her friends, and my brother-in-law was on a business trip as usual. During my sister's absence, she had left all the care of the baby to Susan, instructing her to take care of it. However, without specific instructions, Susan had been imitating what she had seen her mom do. As the baby's condition worsened and started crying in distress, Susan decided to take the baby to the hospital, using her only jacket to wrap the baby despite the cold. During the journey, the realization hit me that had we not found Susan and the baby, they might have collapsed from the cold. The mere thought sent shivers down my spine. My husband, curious about Susan's earlier hostility, asked why she had been acting that way towards me. Susan, looking away awkwardly, revealed that she had been raised to believe a lie, that I was a bad person. This falsehood had been ingrained in her by her mother from a young age. According to Susan, my sister told her that I was bullied by her when I was young, labeling me as a bad person. "So you mustn't get close to her," my sister warned her. For a child, a mother's words are everything, and without verifying the truth, Susan had always perceived me as the enemy who bullied her mom. However, witnessing our genuine efforts to help, Susan began to question her mother's narrative. "Is what Mommy said true? Did you bully Mom?" Susan asked me with direct eyes. I shook my head and explained that my sister and I got along when we were kids. Tearfully, Susan apologized for being so defiant and hating us all this time because of the lies she believed. Understanding the reason behind Susan's long-standing dislike for us brought both relief and a surge of anger towards my sister. Susan revealed that my sister wouldn't be returning until tomorrow, so we decided to take Susan and the baby into our home for the night. As Susan engaged in normal conversation with us, albeit a bit awkwardly, I couldn't help but feel anger at my sister's neglectful actions, leaving Susan hungry and alone at times. After ensuring Susan and the baby had their fill and had gone to sleep, I called my parents to plan the next steps. The following day, with Susan and the baby, we headed to my sister's house. My parents were already there, and my mother rushed to hug Susan and the baby, expressing sympathy for what they had been through. As Susan quietly cried in my mother's embrace, we decided to wait for my sister to return. Leaving Susan with my mother, I went around the neighborhood to inquire about my sister's conduct. Neighbors were outraged when I mentioned my sister's neglect of Susan and the baby, sharing details about her usual cold behavior, often yelling at Susan loudly. Learning that my sister was expected to return home in the afternoon, my parents and I waited for her. I had already called her cell phone, informing her that we had taken Susan in for the night and were waiting at her house. As expected, my sister did not respond to my attempts at contacting her. Without regard for her, my parents and I awaited her return in front of her house. Eventually, she arrived with a few of her friends, scowling at the sight of us. "Huh? Why are you here? And Mom and Dad too. What do you want?" My sister immediately showed her displeasure. Undeterred, I glared back at her and explained the situation. "Last night, we found Susan walking with the baby, so we took them in. I tried contacting you several times, but you never noticed. Besides me, the police and our parents should have also left numerous calls about this incident." Pointing out these facts seemed to catch my sister off guard. Frantically checking her phone, she realized the seriousness of the situation. The color drained from her face as she saw the missed calls from the police. "I have something I need to do after this, so I'll be." "Wait a minute. Where do you think you're going?" My dad grabbed my sister by the scruff of her neck as she tried to flee. Momentarily struggling and thrashing, my sister soon gave up, hanging her head in resignation. Our parents had always been strict about manners and etiquette, instilling in us the importance of upholding such values. Grateful for their guidance, I acknowledged their role in our upbringing. However, my sister never embraced these principles, always finding a way to escape from our parents' expectations. It seemed she harbored an unease or discomfort around our father, perhaps due to his seemingly more severe behavior towards her. In front of her friends, our parents didn't hold back. They vehemently reproached her over her recent misdeeds, and in their time, the mistreatment of her children. They questioned her actions, expressing disbelief at how she could leave a 9-year-old and an infant alone to go on a vacation. How could you even think about leaving a 9-year-old and an infant alone to go on a vacation? Even if Susan is reliable, she's still a child. Tasking her with the absolute care of an infant is inexcusable. Call yourself a mother. And this isn't a one-off thing. You've been making Susan stay at home by herself frequently. On top of not preparing any meals for her, do you even have any sense of being a parent? With my sister's past attitude aired out, her friends looked bewildered. "Wait, didn't you say you left your daughters with your family?" The gravity of her actions became evident, and our parents continued to address her irresponsible behavior. The presence of our infuriated parents, combined with my mournful expression and Susan discreetly eyeballing from behind us, painted a bitter picture. The whole entourage seemed to cast scorns at my sister, making it clear that what my parents were reprimanding her for was indeed the sardonic truth. My sister, unable to bear the pressure, continued making excuses, shaking and pale. "No, that's not it. I was told my husband would be at home yesterday," she stammered, resorting to lies. "How do you plan to explain everything up to now?" I interjected. However, before we could delve further, the local constabulary approached us, stating there were allegations of neglect concerning the children the night before. They requested a further discussion at the police station. My sister, unable to muster any form of fortification, was escorted away to the police station. During her interrogation, which was her first administrative disquisition of such kind, she was given a grave censure. Ultimately, she was released, with my brother-in-law stepping forward as her claimant. He had hurried back from his business trip upon being informed by my parents. Later that evening, my sister and her husband made their disgruntled entrance. Susan rushed to her father with joy, welcoming him back, and he apologized for making her feel lonely. After putting Susan and the baby to bed, we had a serious discussion. When my brother-in-law demanded my sister explain everything, she looked down with a pale face and made an excuse about needing a change of scenery due to parental burnout. Even so, convinced she was lying, I brought up information I had heard from my coworkers, recounting not only this incident but also other times my sister had acted irresponsibly. My brother-in-law became furious upon hearing this. A quick search around the house revealed a hoard of high-end items hidden in my sister's exclusive closet. Confronted with the proof, my sister reluctantly admitted to her misdeeds. She confessed to lying to her husband about their children wanting to take expensive classes and receiving money for it. Moreover, she admitted to often neglecting the children's care, not just when she was out, but also when she was home. Disappointed in having lost all patience, her husband declared, "I'm disappointed in you. You always said you were handling the housework and the kids properly. Let's get a divorce." Despite everything, my sister quietly accepted the divorce. With no excuses left for her misconduct, my sister sought help from our parents, but they refused to get involved, having disowned her at the time of her divorce. Abandoned by everyone, she lived miserably in what once was a mansion she bragged about, now turned into a cluttered house. On the other hand, my brother-in-law had been trying to change his work style for the sake of the family. He had submitted a request to transfer to a department without business trips, seeking more time with his family. His request was soon to be granted, and he decided to take custody of the children. Our parents wholeheartedly agreed with this decision. Susan, delighted to be living with her dad, expressed her joy, saying, "I get to live with Daddy." My sister, with no one on her side, hung her head in defeat. After the divorce, my brother-in-law and Susan moved close to my house to make up for the lack of interaction. My husband and I occasionally played with Susan and her sibling. Since the incident, Susan had grown attached to us, so we often took care of her and the baby when my brother-in-law's work ran late. The baby was growing up healthy and at a cute stage, and we spent our days watching the children grow, living our lives filled with happiness. As I turned towards the voice, I found John and his mother standing there, their expressions laden with disdain. "What's going on here?" I asked, puzzled. "We're moving in with Mom. We tossed out your stuff. If you don't like it, leave," John's mother retorted, her tone sharp. "Yeah, we don't need a daughter-in-law who doesn't care about her husband." "Get out now," John added, his voice dripping with contempt. "And we don't need that unattractive grandchild of yours either." As I opened my mouth to speak about the house, I hesitated. Maybe driving them out wasn't such a bad idea after all. "Well, you're going to regret this later," I muttered under my breath. My name is Alyssa Thompson, a 35-year-old working housewife. I live with my husband John and our son Michael, who's in first grade. Just an ordinary housewife like many out there, except I had grown up in a wealthy family. Despite our wealth, we lived modestly, trying to avoid attention and potential demands for money. John and I both worked at the same company, but I had joined later and risen through the ranks faster. Our marriage had been fine initially, but after tying the knot, John began to resent the difference in our status. He faced ridicule at work and rumors circulated that he was under my control. Despite his frustration, I never blamed him. However, his attitude soared further during my maternity leave. "Must be nice to get money without working," he'd sneer during my time off. And when I returned to work, he'd remind me, "I'm the one supporting you. You better remember that." It was true that I received paid maternity leave, but his resentment seemed to grow as if he couldn't bear the idea of me having financial security without actively working. But in exchange, women risk their lives to give birth. Child care leave is unpaid time off to take care of the child. I was grateful to John for supporting me during that time. Originally, I appreciated John for accepting our dual income setup and for splitting the living expenses fairly. So, there was no need for him to flaunt his dominance. I was saddened by John's change in attitude. After I returned to work from child care leave, our relationship started to strain. John began to neglect my son and me. The deposits into our joint living expenses account gradually decreased until John's contributions hit zero. Even after I returned to work, he didn't lift a finger around the house or help with child rearing. Perhaps he used to feel superior, But now that I've gone back to work, his sense of superiority has been challenged. At work, since I'm the boss, there are times I have to be strict even with my husband regarding matters within my purview. This includes things like business-related warnings, but I try my best to do it discreetly, away from the eyes of other employees. I wonder if John thought I should overlook things simply because he's my husband. I try to act naturally, but it seems even that doesn't sit well with him. I'm always wondering how we can become a harmonious family again. What bothers me just as much as John's attitude is the presence of my mother-in-law, Kate. She's one of those mothers-in-law who adores her son and constantly criticizes everything I do, never missing a chance to put me down. When we got married, she even criticized me for having a higher position at work than John. Oh my, for a woman to claim she's a manager higher than John. What was she thinking? How could a woman like that even think of marrying my dear John? Women should be modest, walking behind their husbands. Such a dated view on women, and Kate shouted it out loud. I'll never forget that shock, especially since John started to ignore me and Michael. Kate's snide comments have gotten worse. Maybe John, when visiting his family home, filled Kate's ears with bad stories about me. Even when I reported going back to work, Kate's sarcasm was relentless. Leaving such a small child and going to work. Don't you have any maternal feelings? Oh, right, a child born to a woman like you can't be cute. And she didn't even bother with Michael after saying that. Being her direct grandson and a boy at that. I thought Michael would at least be doted on by her. But that wasn't the case. I feel so sorry for Michael, treated poorly just because I am his mother. Michael doesn't talk about his father or grandmother. Being in first grade, he must have sensed the ill will directed at him by his father and grandmother. My parents absolutely adore him. My parents absolutely adore Michael. They love him so much that they often say they could eat him up and not feel a thing. They've made and played with toys together, participated in events like making s'mores at campfires, and always engage in conversations with him, listening to his stories with a smile. Due to their warm relationship, Michael seems to prefer being at my parents' home over our own. He frequently stays there for extended periods, especially during summer breaks. It's interesting to observe how different the two sets of grandparents can be. Lately, I've been grappling with John's suspicious behavior. After work, he spends a considerable amount of time at his mother Kate's place, seemingly engrossed in some secret activity. Since John's father passed away not long after our marriage, Kate now lives alone. Despite this, she appears thrilled whenever John visits, fussing over him and providing meals and showers. While this means less workload for me, I can't shake off this nagging feeling of apprehension. What could John be plotting? The only thought crossing my mind is that he might be contemplating moving in with Kate. Kate has always expressed a keen interest in living with John. Every time the topic of moving in together arose, I remember her glaring at me as if I were the enemy. During the earlier, stronger phase of our relationship, John used to firmly reject the idea, assuring me it would just be Alyssa and me. However, since he started asserting dominance, his closeness to Kate has increased. It seems he now wants to live with her, someone firmly on his side, and perhaps intends to further belittle me. Currently, I'm the one managing the living expenses for myself, John, and Michael. Despite earning more than John and having some inheritance from my family, we aren't financially struggling. However, my desire has always been to live solely on the money we earn, without relying on inherited assets. That's why I haven't disclosed the details of the inheritance to John. I wonder what he's doing with his salary. Perhaps he's spending it on his hobbies or trying to please Kate. I really don't want to live with Kate. I don't want to be constantly nagged at, and I certainly don't want Michael to be ignored or verbally abused at home. It's sad that John doesn't pay attention to Michael, but that's still better than him facing outright hostility. If we move in together, it's going to be like walking on eggshells. Lost in thought, I muttered to myself. Suddenly, Michael overheard me. "Mom, what does moving in mean?" I was taken aback, realizing that Michael was right next to me while I was lost in thought. "I'm sorry, I was just thinking." Tell me, Michael, how would you feel if we started living with your dad's mom? Michael is a smart kid. It's better to inform him somewhat than trying to hide everything. After pondering my question for a moment, he replied, Grandma Kate, if we're going to live with a grandma, I prefer your parents. Grandma Kate doesn't talk to me. Seeing the sadness in Michael's eyes hurt. He must have wanted attention from Kate, even though she's the way she is. This made me both sad and angry. How could she treat her own grandchild this way? One day, as these concerns weighed on me, something decisive happened. When I returned home from work, Michael rushed out to me. Mom, Dad's doing a strange thing. Seeing how flustered Michael was, I had a sinking feeling. What happened? What did your dad do? Michael pointed to the garden from the front door. Looking at the garden Michael pointed to, I couldn't believe my eyes. My clothes, books, Michael's clothes, and school supplies were all thrown into the yard. Hey, what's this about? As I stood in shock before the pile of clothes and books, I heard John's laughter. Surprised, I turned towards the voice. There stood John and his mother, Kate. Still not believing the scene before me, I asked John, Hey, what's going on here? Not just my stuff, but Michael's too. I know you don't like me. It might take time to forgive. But if you call it harassment, well, I guess I can understand. But Michael's just a kid in elementary school. What on earth are you and Kate thinking, dragging him into this mess? I felt my blood boiling in anger. To my question, John and Kate snorted in response. Because my mom's going to live with us. I threw out your stuff. If you don't like it, leave. Yeah, we don't need a wife who doesn't care for her husband. Leave and take that not-so-cute grandson you gave birth to with you. John and Kate laughed loudly. Something inside me snapped. Not content with just tossing my things, they threw Michael's out too. And to say in front of Michael that he's not cute and not wanted was enough. I've been patient for too long. All right then, to my response, John and Kate were overjoyed, grinning. They spoke loudly. Now you see how important I am? No matter how high and mighty you act, without me, you can't get by. Exactly. It must be hard for a clueless wife like you, thinking you're better when you should be following your husband. It's pitiful, really. I let off a deep sigh. Michael and I will leave. I assume this means you want a divorce. At my question, John exclaimed with delight. Don't like it? If you don't kneel down, beg, and say you'll serve me, and don't forget to act humble at work, then maybe I'll reconsider the divorce. No need. I'll go to the lawyer's office by tomorrow. As I responded calmly, John looked taken aback. What? You're sure about the divorce? You set it up this way with this stunt. Did he think I'd cry and beg? Clearly flustered by my unwavering stance, John was at a loss for words. Seeing this, Kate chimed in. Why are you being so arrogant? John's offering kind words, and you ignore him. You're really an infuriating daughter-in-law. I replied as I picked up the clothes thrown in the yard. I'd always tried to support you in my own way. But it seems you never noticed. That's it. I don't want to be with someone who doesn't value Michael and me. Michael was quietly gathering his clothes and school supplies. I couldn't imagine how painful it must have been for him, still in elementary school, to have his belongings thrown away by his father and Kate. I didn't show it, but I was seething with anger. In the midst of all this, I suddenly remembered something about our house contract. There was a special clause in our lease. But as I started to talk about the house, I realized something and stopped. Maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to use this to get back at these two. Well, y'all are probably going to regret this later. Not my problem anymore, I said. John seemed frustrated that things weren't going his way. He repeatedly hurled insults at me. With our belongings packed, Michael and I left our home. Later on, carrying our essentials, Michael and I took shelter at my parents' home. They were shocked by John and Kate's behavior, but were happy to take us in. Michael was thrilled to see his grandparents, whom he adored. I needed to finalize the divorce. Leaving Michael with my parents, I started thinking about the next steps. Then I consulted a lawyer who had been a longtime acquaintance of my family. Having dealt with financial matters for a long time, He was experienced in divorce cases involving monetary disputes. The most important thing was child support for Michael. While I could support Michael on my own, I intended for John to uphold his responsibilities as a father. The next day, I returned to our former home with the lawyer. At our old place, John was quickly setting up to live with Kate. Kate, with a wide grin, greeted us. I laid out the divorce papers on the table for John to sign. He quickly filled them out, seemingly eager to be free. Then, the lawyer started explaining the child support. The mention of child support made John and Kate erupt. Child support? I've been embarrassed because of you, and now I have to pay. What a pitiful woman. All you think about is taking money from John. John, you don't owe her a dime, was Kate's predictable reaction, regardless of what they thought. Michael is John's son and your grandchild, Kate. I'll go to court if necessary. At my words, John stood up in anger, but the lawyer calmed him down and explained the reasonableness of the amount. Damn it. If we didn't work at the same company, I could have handled this differently, John muttered in frustration. Of course, since we work at the same place, if word got out that John was dodging child support, it'd be a scandal. To which I added, oh, speaking of which, now that we've got the divorce papers, we're nothing to each other. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to treat you just like any other employee. Now that you're not my husband, I don't have to protect your image. Upon hearing this, John went pale. That's right. To protect his image as my husband, I used to give him feedback privately or subtly within our casual conversations. But the truth is, John isn't that competent in his job. He gets scolded almost daily by other supervisors. Seems he finally realized how much I'd shielded him from. Now he'll be scolded by his ex-wife too, and he'll be laughed at and looked down upon by other employees. Imagining that, he fell silent. After the divorce was finalized, I started taking measures against John and Kate. First, I transferred all the bills I've been covering, like rent and utilities, to John. Then, I sent him an eviction notice. Hey, what's this eviction notice? Why is it coming in your name? A few days later, John called after receiving the eviction notice. Well, it was time for the lease renewal, and I decided not to renew it. Even if you wanted to continue, I decline. It's a house I'm renting out under my name, so it makes sense, doesn't it? What? It's under your name. It was clear from the other side of the phone that John was flabbergasted. In fact, the house he had been living in was under my name. I inherited it as part of my assets and had been renting it out. I wasn't sure what kind of reactions I'd get if John or my former mother-in-law, Kate, found out it was under my name. They might start to rely on the assets and passive income one possesses, especially John. He'd probably quit his job and live a lavish lifestyle, and Kate would likely spend, as if saying, my daughter-in-law's money is my money. So, I had been effectively paying rent to myself. Well, if it's your house, there shouldn't be a problem with me living there. We're married after all. Married? What are you talking about? I already filed for divorce. You and I are complete strangers now. I'm not the type to let a complete stranger live in my house for no reason. Please move out by the specified date. Finally, doubt crept into John's words. Hold on. What do you mean your house? Even if you hold a higher position than me, you're just another employee. Moreover, this is the house we lived in since we got married. Well, maybe you didn't notice because I never told you, but my family has always been wealthy. We own various properties like lands and condos, and some are under my name. At my words, John seemed to be taken aback. The ex-wife he always saw as a foe was, in fact, a wealthy heiress with properties. Yet she still worked, and if he was with her, he'd never have to worry about money. Maybe thinking that, John flipped his stance. Hey, Alyssa, can we give it another try? This time I'm going to treat you right, and we won't live with my mom. What do you say? Quite the about-face. Who would want to start over after all that? Letting it all out, I let him have it. You think I'd ever reconsider things with someone who changes their attitude on a dime? You always said how humiliated you felt because I had a better job and earned more. It's over. I'm moving away from such a person. Good for you. No more shame to bear. I yelled with all I had and hung up. That felt good. I couldn't wait to see what happens with John and Kate. From then on, things seemed to have gone downhill for John and Kate. They struggled to find a new place to live. While I gave them some time before the eviction, they dragged their feet and didn't bother finding a new place. So after the eviction, they had to look for a place while carrying all their stuff. Apparently, it looked pretty ridiculous. Some of our colleagues even saw it, and word spread about them getting kicked out of their house. And now, he had to face me at work. John seemed deeply humiliated. Damn it, if Alyssa would just reconsider, I wouldn't have to go through this. Maybe I should quit this uncomfortable job and move to another company. But quitting wasn't easy for John. He had chosen to live with Kate, which meant he had to cover living expenses for both of them now. For John, who had been relying on me for living expenses for years, it would be tough. Almost all of his income would now go to bills, and he seemed super stressed. Even Kate, who he was once close with, their relationship soared. She had been hoping for a relaxed life, having me handle all the household chores, but that dream was shattered with the divorce. John, who lives with her, covers the living expenses, so Kate must handle the household chores now. It seems he's been making snide remarks towards John. He's such a useless son, doesn't earn much, lets a wife who can both earn well and do chores slip away, and makes me do the housework. What, it's your fault, Alyssa, and I got divorced. If it weren't for you. What'd you just say? How can you say that to your own mother? John has to pay child support for Michael. After paying the child support from his not-so-high salary, he doesn't have much left. He has to live on that small amount. Now that he no longer has the financial security he used to, it seems John and Kate are fighting daily. They might split up and end up living lonely lives on their own. But whatever happens, it's none of my business. In front of his colleagues, John probably couldn't ask me for help. He'd just be ridiculed, clinging to his discarded ex-wife, begging for assistance. I chuckled at the thought. Since then, I've been living in a small apartment near my parents' home with Michael. Life is easier, both financially and mentally, without John and Kate around. Michael's face has brightened a lot. When I come home, he rushes to me right away. Mom, today at school. Hold on, sweetie. Wash your hands and put your backpack away first, then tell me all about it. He chats a lot with me and my parents. Seeing Michael smile, I feel good about the divorce and regret keeping him in that environment. Before, I used to be preoccupied with my relationship with John and Kate, not thinking about the future. But now I can live for a clear goal, Michael's happiness. I've realized the importance of relationships with those around you. Michael, are you getting along with your friends? No one's being mean or anything. Yeah, I'm good. Everyone's nice. And if someone says something wrong, they apologize, and everyone forgives. Even kids know how to be considerate and apologize. I'll try not to act rudely towards others as well. At 2 a.m., the quiet of my room was shattered by the ringing of my phone on the bedside table. The screen illuminated with the name Amy, prompting concern at such an untimely call. Swiftly, I answered, "Hello, Amy." However, the voice on the other end belonged not to my daughter Amy, but to Lily. Her tremulous words conveyed distress. "Mom's crying. Please help." Dad hit Mom and left. Alarmed and confused, I hastily dressed and headed to my car. Upon entering their living room, I found Amy on the floor, tearful. Lily, who had tried to hold back her tears over the phone, was now sobbing uncontrollably as she opened the door for me. In an attempt to reassure, Amy said, "It's nothing serious." Her cheek bore signs of a recent altercation. Curious about the situation, I listened to Amy's account, feeling a chill down my spine. Holding Lily close and stroking her head, I gently spoke. "The next one who's going to be on the floor crying will be John. Allow me to introduce myself. Michelle, 57 years old, a widow for 2 years, and now living alone. My joys in life include visiting my daughter and son-in-law, a 30-minute drive away, watching my 4-year-old granddaughter Lily grow up, and engaging in stock trading, something my late husband taught me. As I trade, I often consult my husband in my heart, seeking advice on whether to sell or wait. Strangely, following his guidance often leads to profitable outcomes. My daughter Amy, 29, got married 5 years ago, and since Lily's birth, she's been a stay-at-home mother while her husband John, a salesman, struggles financially. Contrary to my initial belief, salesmen aren't as well paid as I thought. John's income is meager, and Amy, trying to balance childcare, household chores, and writing, faces challenges. Despite her efforts, she only manages to earn around $300 a month. John's stringent standards for cleanliness and cooking make things even more difficult. He disapproves of shortcuts and insists on home-cooked meals, limiting Amy's productivity. To support my daughter and granddaughter, I provide financial assistance every month, derived from my hobby earnings. Understanding John's pride, I advised Amy to keep his secret. During my visits, I noticed John's hurried demeanor, quickly showering and leaving after brief discussions with Amy in their upstairs room. John's life as a salesman seemed challenging, and I needed to prepare materials for the next day's work. Despite the demands, he appeared to be doing his best without complaints. As he left in his suit, he apologized for leaving while I was there, promising to return soon. Observing John's departure, I expressed concern, murmuring to myself, "I worried he's going to wear himself out." Amy, giving a wry smile, seemed a bit discontented. Peering into her face, I asked if she was upset because he didn't get to eat the meal she prepared. "It's not that," she replied with a hint of reluctance, explaining that he claimed it was work and couldn't be helped. I'd offered a solution, suggesting that if both her parents were busy and she felt lonely, she could call me. I set up Amy's phone so Lily could easily call me, reassuring her that I could be someone for her to talk to when feeling lonely. Little did I expect this to become useful in such an unexpected way. At 2 a.m., my bedside phone rang, and in my groggy state, I searched for it. Seeing Amy's name lit up, I worried that something might have happened and quickly answered. "Hello," I greeted, but it wasn't my daughter Amy on the line. "Grandma, Mom's crying, help." Lily's voice, on the verge of tears, desperately reached out to me. Confused, I didn't know how to respond when Lily informed me that Dad hit Mom and left. Changing quickly, I jumped into my car and arrived at their house. Lily, who had tried to hold back her tears over the phone, now had red eyes and nose from crying. I patted Lily's head and, with her hiccuping behind me, walked down the hallway. Entering the living room, I found Amy slouched on the floor, crying with disheveled hair and one hand covering her face. The distress not only unsettled Lily, but also deeply disturbed me. Giving her a gentle shake, I asked, "Amy, what happened?" She looked up startled, revealing a troubling situation that demanded immediate attention. "And Mom," Amy murmured, looking dazed, seemingly not understanding why I was there. "Where did he hit you?" "Show me." I gently moved her hand away. The cheek she had been covering was red and swollen. Amy let out a whimper and covered it again. "It was just a slap." "It's not a big deal," she said, her voice trembling as she tried to downplay it. I couldn't possibly believe it wasn't a big deal. Even if it was just a marital spat, I couldn't fathom that he would hit her hard enough to cause that kind of swelling. "What happened?" I wet a towel and pressed it to Amy's face. "Well, I never told you before, Mom, but it seems like John's been cheating," Amy confessed, her voice heavy with emotion. "Cheating?" I echoed, stunned by the revelation. "Yeah, he told you he was going back to work the other day, but he actually demanded money from me," she explained. "How could going back to work require so much money?" I accidentally saw the notification on his phone, and the messages were from a woman with sweet words. "He's demanded money several times before, that's why I refused today." "And then he hit you?" I asked, horrified. "Yes, and he almost hit Lily too when she tried to stop him. I stepped in, and in the end, he took money from my purse and left," Amy recounted, her voice trembling with fear and anger. Listening to Amy's story, I felt a chill run through my heart as my eyes widened in shock. What shocked me the most was that John tried to hit Lily. I've been wondering if I can continue living with a man like that. Amy confessed, her voice heavy with uncertainty. Lily, clutching my sleeve tightly, suddenly burst into tears, probably recalling the traumatic moment. I was livid. Cheating was one thing, but laying a hand on family was downright despicable. I wanted to shout at him, to ask him if it wasn't a father's duty to protect his family. But preaching to him wouldn't make a dent. If a lecture could reform him, he would have come to his senses the moment he tried to hit Lily and would already be showing remorse. Holding a sobbing Lily close and stroking her head, I said calmly, "Next time, it's going to be John who's crying on the floor." "What?" Amy looked at me anxiously. "Can you stay with John a bit longer? I'll move in with you. We'll buy a voice recorder and record all your conversations with him," I suggested. "But what if he demands money again? He might try to hit Lily," Amy worried. "We'll record it when he asks for money. It's okay to give him the money. I'll always be with Lily. We need to gather evidence after all. As long as Lily's safe, I'm okay with it," I reassured her. Amy nodded with the determined face of a mother. Then I took a picture of Amy's face with my smartphone. The swelling would serve as evidence. The next day, I packed up my things and went over to Amy and her family's house. "It seems Amy isn't feeling too well, so I'm going to stay for a while and help with household chores and take care of Lily," I announced. At my sudden arrival, John looked surprised and had a guilty expression on his face. "We can't trouble you like this, Michelle." "I can help around the house and with Lily," he said, his charming nature typical of a salesman. "I suppose Lily's quite active, you know. I'd hate to see you get worn out." John expressed genuine concern. "That's okay. What I'm really worried about is whether the lunch I make will be enough for you. But keep it a secret from Amy. If you're still hungry, use this to buy something." I discreetly handed John $200. He scratched his head and said, "Gosh, I feel kind of bad about this." But he put the money in his pocket anyway. He couldn't object to me staying now. From that day on, whenever John came home, I decided to stay in Lily's room and play with her for at least an hour. I tried to always be with Lily and even took a bath with her. This was to give John a chance to talk to Amy without being wary of me. As soon as we finished taking a shower, "We're all done now," John would say with a smile. "Guess it's my turn then. Take your time." On the surface, I got along with John, but as soon as he stepped into the bathroom, I checked in with Amy. "Did he say anything?" I asked. "He did. He thought it was odd when you suddenly decided to live with us. So he asked me if you had said something." Amy giggled before continuing. "John asked me if I had said anything to you. So I told him about you hitting me yesterday. He went silent, so I said I wouldn't dare say something like that." "And then what did he say?" "Don't tell her about it, or I'll hit you again," Amy revealed. He didn't realize I was recording, so he dug his own grave. Seeing Amy laugh like that was reassuring. She seemed like a completely different person from last night. "I hope my presence here can be of some encouragement," I said, and I nodded in agreement. The next evening, while John was in the bath, what we did was check his messages. We were looking for signs of an affair, but to our astonishment, John seemed to have relationships with several women. He has a child, yet he still does this. Amy voiced her disgust under her breath. If he was cheating with women like this, no amount of money, even if he's rich, would ever be enough. "Let's meet up. Maybe hit that hotel again." "Yesterday was awesome." Amy read aloud while slowly scrolling through these messages. I took a video of John's entire smartphone screen. "Hold on a minute, is this?" Amy paused and stared intently at the screen. The chat displayed the message. "Come by my place again next week, Mr. Salesman," dated from the previous week. Amy frowned, especially at the heart emoji at the end of it. It seemed that John was hitting on clients too, leaving us in sheer disbelief. As we looked up at the ceiling, both of us let out a heavy sigh. The next day, we sought legal consultation from a lawyer named Mr. Ramirez. He listened attentively to our story and explained that the video capturing the chat alone wouldn't suffice as solid evidence. Mr. Ramirez advised us to gather pictures of them entering the hotel together, hotel receipts, or credit card statements, pointing to the message that read, "Come by my place again next week, Mr. Salesman." I paused the video we were watching and inquired, "So next week means this week, right? We might still catch them." Deciding to take immediate action, we hired a private investigator, PI, and tasked him with investigating John's activities during work hours, including the time spent at clients' places. 3 days later, the PI provided a detailed report, and we nodded in satisfaction, appreciating his efforts. "Fantastic. Keep up the good work," we told the PI. Armed with evidence of John's infidelity, we began planning a trap for him at home. I withdrew $50,000, some of the money I had earned from stocks, and placed it in a dresser on the second floor of Amy's house, the same guest room where I had been staying. While John was at work during the day, we had been moving our clothes and personal items to my house, preparing for a quick move. The dresser was practically empty already, making the neatly bundled $10,000 bills with bands stand out. We considered that John might have already run out of the $200 I gave him the other day. That dresser was practically empty already. While John was at work during the day, we had been moving our clothes and personal items to my house, readying ourselves for a quick move. With the drawers being empty, the money will certainly stand out. Neatly bundled $10,000 bills with bands will surely catch John's eye, I explained to Amy. "I gave John $200 the other day. How long do you think that'll last him?" I asked. Amy replied with a tilt of her head. "It varies when he asks, but if he thinks you have money too, he might have already run out." "Well, the timing might be just right then," I mused as we quietly closed the drawer with the $50,000. That night, as usual, I took a bath with Lily. Just as I began to undress, my phone rang. It was a call from Amy. I had asked her to call me if John ever asked her for money. Telling Lily to wait a moment, I tiptoed up the stairs outside the room I was staying in and eavesdropped. "Money again? What are you spending it all on? Shut up, your mom might hear. Just give it to me. You gonna hit me again? If you don't want to be hit, hand over the money." "I'm in a hurry," I heard John demanding, followed by a sigh from Amy and the sound of the drawer opening. "What though? Why do you have so much cash?" I heard John exclaim just as the drawer closed. Swiftly, I slid the room's door open. "I'm sorry, Amy John. I was about to take a bath but felt dizzy. Could I lie down for a bit?" "Are you okay, Mom?" I requested, lying down. Amy immediately put a blanket over me, and even the usually smug John clicked his tongue softly and left the room without a word. After a while, I heard John leaving through the front door. "We need to hurry," I whispered to Amy. We gathered the money from the dresser, took our belongings, and left Amy's house. The next day, John received a call from Mr. Ramirez, the lawyer. A date was set, and with Mr. Ramirez present, the divorce discussions began. I dialed up John's office and identified myself as his mother-in-law, requesting to speak with the manager. After conveying the matter, I asked them to keep quiet about the conversation until the designated day and hung up. Everything was set. On the day of the discussion, John visited my house. I had told Lily to stay upstairs and not come down. John didn't hide his discontented face, and without greeting me, faced Amy and heavily sat down on the couch. Mr. Ramirez greeted him, handed over his business card, and John hesitated for a moment before nodding in acknowledgement. "So what's this about you wanting a divorce?" John bluntly asked Amy. "Yes, I want a divorce. Also, I like alimony for abuse and child support," Amy asserted. "What? Are you kidding me? You leave the house saying you want a divorce out of the blue, and now you want alimony and child support?" "Mr. Ramirez, she's the one causing all this trouble," John claimed, banging the table and glaring at Amy, turning a frustrated face to Mr. Ramirez. "I have evidence of you cheating and also of the physical abuse," Amy calmly replied. She placed a photo on the table, taken by a private investigator, showing John and another woman exiting a hotel. Following that, I played an audio recording taken on my phone where John admitted to the violence. "Hey, you tricked me, huh? Recording sneaky stuff like this, huh?" John raised his voice, attempting to grab Amy's collar. Both Mr. Ramirez and I stepped in to stop him, and after Mr. Ramirez's stern words, John calmed down and settled back into his seat. While trying to listen to both parties, if this settlement doesn't proceed, Amy is considering filing for divorce or suing. She seems to have her evidence in order and doesn't seem to be backing down. Mr. Ramirez subtly urged John to be reasonable. Lost in thought, John finally spoke up loudly, saying, "But even if it was me who cheated, I still have the right to claim a share of the assets that Amy has, right?" "Yes, if you make the claim," replied Mr. Ramirez. "Then I'm claiming." "Too bad, Amy. I don't have any assets left." "Hand over half of yours," John said smugly. Amy coolly responded, "I don't have any either." "What?" After a long stare at a stunned John, Amy spoke again. "I don't have any property or money." Liar. There was $50,000 in that drawer. "Oh, that's mine." Upon hearing my words, John exclaimed, "What? You see, my mom has been helping me out every month. Even the money I gave to you was from her support. If you divorce Amy, I don't see any reason to help you anymore. In fact, I feel like pressing charges for you hitting my precious daughter." John turned pale, and unfortunately, it seemed more like the shock of not getting any money rather than my words that got to him. But we weren't about to let it end there. Amy placed several more photographs on the table showing John visiting a house on a sales call. "You were there for an hour and a half. Do sales calls usually take that long? What were you doing inside?" Upon hearing Amy's words, John snorted with laughter, claiming, "Sales involve explaining the product and stuff. Sometimes it takes long. I get asked questions." "Oh, really?" Amy smirked and placed another picture. "So, explaining the product means you got to strip down to your underwear. Must have been a heck of an explanation." In that picture, John stood by the window shirtless, and through the sheer curtain, a woman in lingerie hugging John was clearly visible. "Ugh," John choked on his words, and Amy placed a sheet of A4 paper. "I had a detective keep an investigation going. This is a list of your mistresses. Compare this to your company's client list, and we'll know just how many customers you've been involved with." By now, John was rendered speechless. Just then, the doorbell rang, and I stood up, saying, "Perfect timing." Hearing my words, John whispered, "No way." I thanked the person at the door and led them to the living room. Seeing the person, John screamed in horror, "Boss." Clutching the photos and list from the table to his chest, John cowered on the carpeted floor, apologizing, "I'm so sorry. I'll pay alimony, child support, anything. Please, please forgive me." Amy and I exchanged glances inside. "It's a shame, but you're too late." "We've already made copies of everything," I said. Amy and I presented the photos and list to the boss. As the boss went through them, one by one, speechless, only John's sobbing echoed throughout the room. Unsurprisingly, John got fired. Moreover, he launched a claim for damages for the cancellation of contracts by the company. The mistresses, too, are playing innocent, claiming they were tricked, seduced, or even forced by John alone. It's karma, I think. Of course, Amy's going after him for every penny in alimony and child support. Using Mr. Ramirez as her representative, John couldn't pay everything he owed, and not even his rent. Rumor has it he was evicted from his home. Come to think of it, Amy mentioned seeing him doing some unfamiliar road construction work. He looked like he was about to cry as his younger coworkers yelled at him. As for us, the three of us live happily in my house. Amy started working, and I look after Lily. But I don't find it hard at all. On the contrary, every day is fulfilling. Even though we live together, sometimes Lily calls with Amy's cell phone, saying, "Love you, Grandma." Hearing that cheerful voice always warms my heart. My husband finished moving with his typical condescending tone and asked me if I was done. I responded coldly without meeting his gaze. From that point on, I didn't utter a word and started preparing to leave the house. The daily berating from my husband and mother-in-law had reached its limit, and it felt like something within me had shattered. I knew I couldn't deal with them anymore. The moment my husband told me to leave, an odd calmness washed over me. Since then, I prioritized myself, ignoring both my husband and mother-in-law. The day after I truly left, I received several frantic calls from my mother-in-law. When she asked, "Who's this?" my faint ignorance left her dumbfounded. From that point on, the nefarious actions of my husband and mother-in-law were exposed, and their lives spiraled into chaos. My name is Catherine. I work part-time at a nearby deli. I married Bob at 25, gave birth to our son Charlie at 28, and now, as we celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary, we're both 50. Recently, Charlie graduated from college and began his life as a working adult. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. These 25 years weren't just full of joy. There were hardships and haunting memories from the past. Looking back, Bob and I were never a great couple. While divorce was never on the table, we had our fair share of big arguments stemming from trivial things. However, once Charlie was born, those moments became less frequent. Charlie was like a dream come true for Bob, who always wanted a boy. Despite my decision not to have more children and to focus on raising Charlie, our relationship wasn't always smooth. Charlie went through his rebellious phase, and we had disagreements about his future. Yet he was always straightforward, clear about what he wanted and needed to do, never hesitating to share his opinions. I believed Charlie should pursue his passions, but Bob had a different idea. Listen up. A man's worth is in his education. I'll never approve if you just finish high school. And if you go to college, it better be a top one, or I ain't paying. Bob tried to force Charlie onto a path he laid out. Charlie, however, wasn't one to stay quiet. In the end, he clashed with Bob and chose a college program he desired. Despite the ongoing issues, Charlie successfully graduated, giving us something to be thankful for. As we both turned 50, we looked forward to our second life, hoping for a peaceful time in our later years. Unfortunately, those faint hopes were soon shattered when a visit from my mother-in-law dramatically changed my life. One day after work, I returned home to find a pair of women's shoes at the entrance, indicating a visitor. Heading to the living room, I discovered my mother-in-law there. Upon realizing I was home, she let out an exaggerated sigh. Bob, with a lazy tone, informed me that his mom wanted to live with us because she felt lonely living alone after the recent passing of my father-in-law. She had already given up her apartment, leaving us with seemingly no option but to let her stay with us. While I empathized with her feelings, I wasn't thrilled about the sudden decision for her to move in. Dealing with my mother-in-law had always been challenging for me. Until now, it had been just Bob, Charlie, and me living together. However, there was a time when we briefly lived with my in-laws right after we got married. Back then, my mother-in-law adamantly opposed Bob moving out, pushing aggressively for us to live together. Reluctantly, I agreed, but it quickly became unbearable due to her intrusive nature. Her constant comments about when we'd have kids and criticism of my cooking may have contributed to my fertility issues. Bob, realizing the situation wasn't good, persuaded her, with my father-in-law's help, to let us move out. However, it seemed like she held a grudge against me ever since. Despite visiting during holidays, we generally avoided them throughout the rest of the year. Just when we thought we had regained our peace, the idea of living together again seemed unthinkable. As I tried to process everything, Bob sighed and advised me not to be so obvious with my feelings, considering it rude to his mom. He assumed I would object, and he believed it would be a waste of time to discuss it since my siblings were busy with their own kids, leaving his mom with no one else to rely on. However, it became evident that he was quite irritated. Since she had already given up her place, there seemed to be no turning her away. Exhausted, I attempted to sit on the couch, but she stopped me, insisting that I go make dinner. She wouldn't even let me rest, and as expected, she complained about the meal. Thinking that this would be my life day in and day out gave me a headache. Later on, both Bob and my mother-in-law informed me that they had something to discuss. Apparently, they wanted to undertake some renovations. The house, being quite old, did need some repairs here and there, and we had taken care of those minor issues. However, what she particularly didn't like were the plumbing areas. She claimed the bathroom and toilet looked old and dingy and needed a makeover. Strangely, she had no intention of using the kitchen, so she said it was fine the way it was. Our mortgage was set to finish when we turned 60, giving us about 10 years left on it. Even so, I wasn't keen on the idea of renovating. A few days later, unbelievably, while I was at work, she took it upon herself to get an estimate and even signed a contract with a contractor. To make matters worse, Bob withdrew a large chunk from our retirement savings without my knowledge, costing us thousands of dollars. When I confronted Bob, he lost his temper, asserting that the house was in his name, and he could do whatever he wanted. He questioned why someone with a measly part-time job was always butting in. I was speechless, struggling to make him understand the sacrifices I made, giving up my career for our family. It's been about 6 months since we started living with my self-centered mother-in-law. Initially, it seemed she had moved in due to loneliness. However, as time passed, I started suspecting other motives. She appeared worried about her own care in her old age and finances. It turned out she almost had no inheritance from my late father-in-law and no savings of her own. Despite receiving a pension, she never took out any life insurance, and her hobby was playing slot machines, which baffled me. Currently unemployed, she relies on a pension that my father-in-law had been contributing to for years. Despite this, she always claimed to be broke, blowing her entire pension on slot machines the same day. As a result, she constantly made lavish requests without contributing a dime, forcing us to cut back on many of our expenses. She would often express her desire to eat out or purchase expensive cosmetics to maintain a youthful appearance. Since Bob was reluctant to spend money on anything other than himself, my mother-in-law consistently approached me for cash. Initially, I would assist her by purchasing essentials and occasionally providing some money. However, as the requests accumulated over time, I decided to put my foot down and refuse to give her any more. This decision seemed to cause her significant stress, leading her to continue her gambling habit and pursue insatiable desires. To my shock, she resorted to sneakily stealing small amounts from my wallet, hoping I wouldn't notice. When I realized some cash was missing, I confronted her, but she played dumb. From that day on, her harassment escalated. She had been bad-mouthing me to Bob, portraying me as the villain. As a result, my husband began looking at me with disdain, accusing me of accusing his mother without proof. Their mistreatment intensified, and one day, during an argument with Bob, his mother interjected, accusing me of living off her son's salary and belittling me for being just a part-timer. They treated me not as a family member, but more like a maid. Bob wouldn't even address me by my name. Their constant harassment took a toll on my mental well-being, and I reached my breaking point. One morning, after my mother-in-law left for her daily walk, I mustered the courage to tell Bob that I couldn't live with his mother anymore. Unexpectedly, his reaction was explosive. His face turned red as he shouted, claiming there were plenty of women who could replace me, ordering me to leave and never show my face again. Shocked, something inside me shattered, be it my rationality or my patience. With a calm voice, I acknowledged his words, quickly got ready, and left for work. Since then, I prioritized myself, ignoring both Bob and his mother. About a week after our fight, Bob, still looking down on me, asked if I had moved out yet. His mother had asked the same, but I didn't make eye contact, simply responding, "I'm leaving." After that, I didn't utter another word, grabbed my things, and left the house we had lived in for years. As expected, the very next day, my mother-in-law bombarded me with incessant calls. The frequency of her calls felt borderline insane. It became too bothersome to pick up, so I ignored my mother-in-law's incessant calls. When the calls persisted to the point where I couldn't even look at my phone, I decided to block her. Soon after, a call came from Bob's phone. Contemplating whether to ignore it or not, I ultimately answered, expecting to face the issue eventually. To my surprise, it wasn't Bob, but his mother on the other end, questioning why I was ignoring her and accusing me of being rude. Suppressing my laughter, I responded, "Sorry, who's this? This number belongs to my husband, Bob, but some strange woman's calling. I better hang up." Emphasizing my point, I disconnected the call. However, the phone rang again, and this time, it was Bob. Furious, he shouted at me, accusing me of messing with him. Unusually, I fired back, catching him off guard and leaving him flustered. I sensed that Bob and his mother were trying to convey something, probably along the lines of not intending for me to leave and implying it would be tough without me as a free housekeeper. But I had reached my breaking point, and Bob's words were just the final straw. I declared that I had no intention of returning to that house, unable to see myself living with him or his mother any longer. I suggested getting a divorce. After that, I could hear Bob and his mother arguing in the background. Their muffled conversations seemed to revolve around topics like my part-time income, the embarrassment of divorcing at our age, and doubts about my decision to leave. I firmly stated that discussing the divorce terms would be more productive than talking to them, and I declared my intention to get a lawyer. As I was about to hang up, Bob pleaded in a desperate tone, asking me to come back, admitting he was wrong. Curious about what he wanted, I listened. However, his apology seemed half-hearted, and he made a ridiculous request for me to return. It was clear he would revert to his condescending ways. Infuriated, I retorted that I'm not his personal maid and suggested hiring someone for housework. Bob shouted at me, attempting to intimidate me, but over the phone, I stood my ground. Frustrated, he pleaded, asking me to wait and apologizing again. I decided to reveal everything his mother had been doing behind his back, from stealing money to selling his cherished belongings at a thrift shop. Bob seemed disbelieving and checked the closet as I detailed the theft of his brand-name bags and clothes. In the midst of commotion on the call, Bob discovered that his prized possessions were indeed missing. His mother continued to feign innocence, even suggesting a burglar might be responsible for the theft. I calmly pointed out the impossibility of an intruder breaking in, highlighting the security measures we had in place with a contracted security company and surveillance cameras. The evidence strongly indicated an inside job, suggesting that his mother was using the death of his father as an excuse to target our money. I emphasized that the police couldn't intervene in civil matters, implying that Bob would indeed have his hands full with the situation. Bob's stifled sobs were evident as I confronted him with the truth about his mother's actions. He mentioned contacting me regarding the divorce, and I reiterated my firm decision. Days later, we met at a local diner to discuss matters further. Bob and his mother appeared haggard, with the receipt from her purse confirming the sale of Bob's belongings. In the meeting, Bob expressed his awareness of his mother's financial troubles and suggested getting her a place in a public housing project without offering financial assistance. However, I made it clear that my only goal was the divorce, not involvement in their financial affairs. Despite Bob's pleas and promises to repay the money his mother took, I remained resolute in seeking a divorce. As the conversation seemed to veer towards reconciliation, I tried to redirect the focus back to the divorce. Bob's pleas intensified, with him begging for forgiveness and promising never to upset me again. Unmoved, I reiterated my desire for a divorce. Frustrated by the lack of progress, I decided to take a different approach. Pulling out a photograph from my bag, I revealed Bob's affair with a coworker that had been going on for over a year. The picture captured Bob walking hand in hand with the other woman. The revelation shocked both Bob and his mother, who had turned even paler. I explained that I had discovered the affair a year ago, but kept silent to avoid impacting Charlie's college years. However, now, With the added stress from his mother and Bob's mistreatment, I had reached my limit. I disclosed that if he didn't agree to the divorce, I was prepared to hold him accountable for the affair. This affair, which I initially considered overlooking, had become a breaking point for me. Bob, visibly shaken, begged me not to divorce, claiming it was just a fling. His mother also tried to intervene, mentioning the potential shock it would cause Charlie. In the aftermath of the revelations, I met Bob and his mother at a local diner to discuss the divorce. To their surprise, Charlie, whom I had already informed about the situation, joined us. With a stern look, Charlie directed disdain towards Bob, expressing his disappointment. He highlighted that learning about the affair was shocking, but what his grandmother had done was even worse. Bob's mother appeared on the verge of tears. Bob, in his pitiful state, became defensive, scolding Charlie, claiming it didn't concern him and accusing him of getting too big for his britches. However, Charlie calmly reminded Bob of his lack of family commitment, emphasizing that work had always been his first love. Charlie pointed out that his mother took care of everything at home, even funding his high school and college education, while Bob was neglectful of family responsibilities. Bob was left aghast, not expecting such revelations from his son. Charlie's words were a wake-up call, exposing Bob's long-standing irresponsibility with money. The truth was, Bob had a habit of wasting money, similar to his mother's lavish spending on slot machines and outings with younger men. This financial strain was one reason why we hadn't had more children. Bob tried to interrupt, claiming he made payments, and his mother agreed, but I continued to state my case. I emphasized my significant contributions to living expenses, managing funds for Charlie's education, and never receiving financial support from Bob. Charlie supported my claims, revealing that Bob never gave him any gifts or allowances. Facing this undeniable truth, Bob and his mother were left speechless. Charlie expressed that despite being seen as an heir, his mother was the one who supported him during his college years. Bob's attempts to defend himself and his mother were futile. At this point, I declared that I had had enough and wanted a divorce. Charlie affirmed his support for me, and we left the cafe, leaving Bob and his mother in stunned silence. After the divorce, Bob's affair was exposed at his workplace, leading to his demotion and transfer. The woman he had the affair with faced consequences as well, with the truth of her initiating the affair surfacing, leading to her voluntary resignation. Post-divorce, Bob continued to live in the house with his mother, struggling with household chores and financial difficulties. His savings were meager, and his life took a downturn, marked by unemployment and gambling addiction. The once proud home was now in disarray, and rumors circulated about Bob selling the house and moving to an apartment. In contrast, I rented an apartment near Charlie and his fiance's home as my new residence. They expressed their desire for me to be close by, and I embraced my role as a supportive mother-in-law. Learning from the past, I aimed to strike a balance between being helpful and not interfering too much. With the prospect of grandchildren in the future, I looked forward to a peaceful and lively second chapter in my life. Hey, are you awake? If so, get out of the hospital quick, you useless wife. An unfamiliar man suddenly yelled at me as I was waking up. Excuse me, who are you? Are you sure you've got the right person? Upon hearing my words, the man seemed taken aback for a moment, but then quickly smirked. Huh, who the heck is this guy? Gives me the creeps. If you don't remember, that's fine. Just hurry up and get back home, useless wife, he said with a nasty remark and an unsettling grin, then left the room. What on earth happened to me today? Let me take you back to the worst day of my life, 2 years ago. My name is Hazel Thompson, a divorced 32-year-old. 2 years prior, at the age of 30, I woke up in a hospital bed surrounded by an eerie feeling. I couldn't understand why I was in such a place. No matter how hard I tried to recall, I couldn't remember anything before falling asleep. When I tried to sit up, a sharp pain shot through my head. Ouch! I touched my head and felt a bandage. Did I hurt my head? But why? Since waking up, my mind was filled with questions. While I was still confused, a man approached me. "Hey, you awake? If so, get out of here, you useless wife." He glared at me and suddenly shouted, "Excuse me, who are you? Are you sure you've got the right person?" I didn't recognize the man and hesitantly spoke to him. My words made the man's eyes widen in surprise. He looked really mad, perhaps confusing me with someone else. I gave the man a friendly smile, hoping he'd realize his mistake and move on. That's what I thought, but instead of leaving, he looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Do you not remember? Don't you know why you're here?" I nodded honestly, and he smirked eerily. "If you don't remember, I guess that's fine. If that's the case, no worries. Just hurry back home, you useless wife." Then he kicked my bed and stormed out of the room. Huh. Who was that guy? Creepy, right? He definitely mistook me for someone else, but he sure acted like he owned the place. If he's someone's husband, that's just terrible. Lost in these thoughts, my mother entered the room as if swapping places with the man. "Hazel, you're awake." Thank goodness. Tears filled her eyes as she rushed to me. "Mom, I'm sorry for worrying you." "I'm okay. But just before you came in, some weird guy was here, and he yelled at me. I think he confused me with someone else. Is everything all right?" As I said this, my mother tilted her head and said, "Huh, the guy who just left was Kyle, wasn't he?" "Did someone come in before Kyle?" "Kyle? Who's that? Your husband?" "No way, Mom. Stop joking." "What are you talking about?" "Just wait a second, Hazel. Are you serious? Didn't you get married last year? You came to tell me how happy you were to get married before turning 30. Don't you remember?" "Mom, what are you talking about? I'm only 28. What do you mean, before turning 30? Upon hearing this, my mother rushed out of the room in panic. Soon, doctors and nurses came rushing in, and I underwent various tests. I was later diagnosed with amnesia due to a severe head injury. It turned out I hadn't lost all my memories, but have forgotten about the last 2 years since I met my husband, Kyle. It seems I've lost my memories from the age of 28 to 30. The man who had yelled at me earlier, Kyle, was indeed my husband. Kyle had yelled at me without showing any concern after I woke up. I wondered why I had married such a man. The next day, in the afternoon, the same man, supposedly my husband Kyle, visited the room. This time he was accompanied by an older woman. Is this woman also someone I know? While I pondered that, she said, "Look at that, you're already up. How long were you planning on lounging around, just like Kyle?" Instead of showing concern, she snapped at me. "Excuse me, but who are you?" Upon hearing my question, she looked surprised but retorted, "Wow, just like Kyle said, you really don't know me." "I'm so sorry I don't recognize you or the man from earlier either, just like Kyle did yesterday." She smirked and added, "Well, that's convenient. Kyle, you played your cards right." What did she mean by played your cards right? When I looked puzzled, Kyle explained, "You're my wife, and this is my mother. Got it?" Apparently, this woman was his mother, in other words, my mother-in-law. "By the way, it's just a little injury, right? How long are you planning on staying in the hospital? Who's going to cook our meals? And there's a pile of laundry. Hurry up and come home." Joining in, my mother-in-law exclaimed, "That's right. Do you know how much this hospital stay is going to cost? And what about work? You've been missing out, but the pay is still coming in, right?" Kyle and my mother-in-law kept nagging and blaming me, but when my mother came to visit, their attitude changed drastically. "Hazel, how are you feeling? Oh, you guys are here too." It seems Hazel has lost her memory from the time she met Kyle. Addressing the in-laws, my mother's voice trailed off. My mother-in-law quickly said, "She hit her head, right? At least she looks okay. That's a relief." My mother-in-law hurriedly added, "Well, we'll be off then," and they left in a hurry. I asked my mother, "Did I really marry that man?" "Yes, Kyle has always taken great care of you, and your mother-in-law was kind too. After getting married, you moved to the Thompsons' family home. Until yesterday, we didn't hear anything from you. Out of the blue, we were told you had an accident. What's been going on? Why didn't you contact us? No, Mom, that's what I'm saying. I don't remember anything. What happened? I replied with a laugh, but I couldn't shake off the unease. The Kyle and mother-in-law I met after losing my memory were nothing like the caring and kind people my mother described. Their attitude had completely changed once my mother arrived. They seemed more concerned about house chores and money than me. Wait, money. That reminds me. What's happening with my job, Mom? Speaking of which, you're still continuing your work as a tax consultant, right? You're still working there. Mr. Johnson was concerned and said you should take it easy for now. After graduating from college, you acquired your CPA license and you got a job at Johnson's CPA firm. That's a relief. You're still continuing with your job. But wait, right now, it should be the middle of a weekday. My mother is a stay-at-home mother, and I've been given time off from the CPA office to recover. But what about those two? They came to the hospital, but aren't they working? The more I thought about Kyle and my mother-in-law, the more suspicious I became. And it wasn't just me, my mother, seeing my behavior, started to become suspicious of Kyle and his mother as well. Then the next day, I still couldn't recall my memories. Kyle and his mom visited the hospital again in the afternoon. Hey, Hazel, enough is enough. At first, I thought it was okay if you lost your memories, but how long are you going to stay here? I've been telling you to come home and take care of me. Before the accident, how did I handle such harsh words from Kyle? But thinking about it, there's nothing I can do since I can't remember. No matter what you say, I don't remember you. I don't want to live with someone I don't know. Besides, I'm still receiving treatment. Why don't you take care of yourself? You're an adult, right? I boldly said that to Kyle. He then grabbed me by the collar, his face turning bright red, and said, "You trying to defy me? I did you a favor by marrying a slowpoke like you. No one will want you if I leave you." His mother, my mother-in-law, chided Kyle. "Didn't we agree you wouldn't raise your hand?" Outside, while saying that, she added, "Kyle's right. We're putting up with a clut like you. All you need to do is earn money and take care of us." Suddenly acting defiant and being cocky, being hospitalized and wasting money, whether it was from being grabbed by the collar or from their confrontation. A dull pain like I was hit with a blunt object ran through my head. Then I remembered everything. It felt like a fog lifting from my mind, and everything became clear, from meeting Kyle to our married life and why I had the accident. I remembered everything, but I couldn't let those two know that I regained my memory. Pretending to still have amnesia, I said, "Stop it. I might not remember how I was before, but I'll call the police, okay?" Upon hearing this, Kyle let go of me, and my mother-in-law angrily remarked, "You ungrateful wife, don't get carried away." But again, their attitude changed dramatically as soon as my mother appeared. "Oh, hey, you've been visiting every day, haven't you?" With a forced smile, my mother-in-law addressed my mother. Today, a counselor also joined my mother. Apparently, there was going to be a discussion with Kyle, my mother-in-law, and my mother to help retrieve my memories. Though my memory had already returned, this seemed like the perfect opportunity. Without letting the counselor know I had remembered, we began the session. Kyle and my mother-in-law insisted there was no pressing need for me to force my memories back, and just like that, their attitude changed completely from just moments ago. Kyle spoke with a bright smile, detailing how harmoniously we had lived as a married couple up until now. My mother-in-law enthusiastically recounted how we lived like a real mother and daughter. Where did these two learn to act so convincingly? Their tales seemed so fabricated. It was clear they were enjoying spinning their web of lies. Hearing their stories, I couldn't help but frown. My mother, sensing something amiss, made eye contact with me. I felt sorry for the counselor, but when I asked if I could pose a question, she encouraged me to ask whatever I was curious about. I then asked Kyle and my mother-in-law how I'd always been a terrible wife. The counselor exclaimed in shock, "A terrible wife?" She exclaimed in surprise. My mother-in-law quickly retorted, "Hazel, what are you talking about?" What's gotten into you all of a sudden? Huh, didn't you guys keep calling me a useless wife and klutz just yesterday and today? Oh my, we never said that. Are you sure you didn't mishear? But you've been telling me to hurry home and do the chores, calling me a useless wife, and saying things like putting up with someone as useless as me, right? Am I being bullied by you? Upon saying this, my mother-in-law, drenched in sweat, interjected, Hazel, stop it. That's not true. My husband was like, that's right. Hazel and Mom always got along really well. The two of them were visibly flustered, far more than you'd expect if they really had a close relationship. I remember everything now from our marriage up until the accident. They always burdened me with all the household chores. On top of that, my mother-in-law used to take most of my salary, claiming it was for living expenses. Facing Kyle, I inquired, by the way, Kyle, what do you do for a living? He hesitated to respond. I've been working at the accounting firm and doing all the housework, right? That means you must be so busy you can't do housework, yet you come to the hospital every day at noon. What exactly are you doing? I took some time off from work because I was worried about you. Really? So what's your job? That's none of your business right now. Kyle was becoming increasingly agitated. Shouldn't we be discussing everything openly during counseling? I looked to the counselor for support, and she gave Kyle a curious glance. Kyle, turning a deep shade of red, declared, I'm currently out of work. What's wrong with that? He shouted back defiantly. So you're unemployed then? Does that mean your mother works? When I asked that, my mother-in-law stammered, Me, I am now. My mother-in-law began to get flustered. So you're unemployed too. In our time, it was common for women to stay at home and look after the house. Your mother did the same thing. What's wrong with that? I could see their true colors as their temper flared. No one's saying being unemployed is a bad thing. But if that's the case, why was I doing all the housework even though I was working, especially when both of you and Kyle had the time to share the chores? It just doesn't make sense to me. Getting increasingly frustrated, my mother-in-law snapped. What are you trying to say? It's a given for a wife to do house chores, but you two were living off the money I earned, right? Isn't that a bit much? You don't get too big for your boots. It's only natural for you to earn money for Kyle's sake. Just be grateful you have someone like him. Finally, my mother-in-law, forgetting that my mother and the counselor were present, began to yell at me. What's going on? I'm clearly being tormented here. Why did I marry someone like this? Someone who won't even stand up for me when I'm being bullied by his mother. I married the worst kind of guy. When I said that, Kyle retorted, You calling me the worst? Don't mess with me. You're lucky to be married to a catch like me. It's only natural you'd serve me. I can't stand this charade anymore. This hospital bill is such a waste of money. I don't have money to waste on you. Just come back home. Kyle shouted this, and my mother-in-law chimed in, Exactly. You've been hospitalized for days. How much is that going to cost? We were just thinking of letting you stay at home during the summer because you said you'd obey and follow me. Kyle laughed along and added, Too bad because you opposed Mom. Your bedroom turned back into the barn. The counselor, who had been silently listening, exclaimed, You had her sleep in a barn during this scorching summer. Caught off guard, the two stammered, Well, she was being rebellious. They desperately began to make excuses, but it was already too late. Then my mother said, What do you mean by making my daughter sleep in the barn? She confronted my mother-in-law and Kyle with those words. Turning to the counselor, my mother inquired, You've been recording all of this conversation, right? The counselor had mentioned at the beginning that the sessions would be recorded for future reference. The counselor affirmed, Of course. Upon hearing this, Kyle and my mother-in-law began trembling and mumbled, We're sorry, in a pitiable tone. But this was just the beginning. Shall we go for the finishing blow? I announced. Everyone froze. I remember everything. Kyle and my mother-in-law jumped up, exclaiming, We're so sorry, we repent. Please spare us any more of this, begging for forgiveness. But why should I forgive? I explained to everyone why I ended up being hospitalized. Back then, I was utterly brainwashed by the two of them. Even though I was initially tormented after our marriage, they'd be kind to me afterwards. I was relied on, gradually beginning to feel that these two couldn't manage without me. With such a mindset, it's strange how I started to follow their every command. I was told not to contact my real parents, and I obeyed that without a second thought. More importantly, even when I was mistreated, I never felt that the treatment was unjust. Then came the day of the accident. Kyle would always come to my workplace, partly to keep an eye on me. But that day, by chance, he saw me greet my boss, Mr. Johnson, on the way home. Inside the car, he yelled at me, "Were you always flirting with other men besides me, like you did just now?" In a fit of rage, he pulled the car over and tried to drag me out of it. Even though I resisted desperately, Kyle pushed me so hard that I hit my head against the guardrail and fell onto the road. Ignoring me lying there, he drove away. Luckily, a passerby called an ambulance, and I was safely taken to the hospital. The reason for Kyle's smug smile when he realized I had lost my memory was his relief that it wouldn't be revealed that he was responsible for the accident. They probably came to the hospital not to visit me, but to make sure I hadn't regained my memory. It happened on a major street, and there are plenty of security cameras. If they check, they'll surely find footage of Kyle pushing me. If I report this to the police, Kyle will likely face charges. Frantically, Kyle pleaded, "I didn't mean any harm. I was just jealous. I'll treat you right from now on, Hazel. Please forgive me. You wouldn't want me to get arrested, right?" Unfortunately for him, after the accident and the temporary memory loss, the brainwashing had been completely undone. I calmly told Kyle, "Sadly, I no longer have any feelings for you. In fact, I genuinely hope you get arrested. Reflect on your actions while serving your time. Also, let's get divorced, and yes, I'll be asking for compensation." Kyle crumbled to the ground, murmuring, "No way," sobbing so intensely it was hard to believe a grown man could cry that much. My mother-in-law, even at this point, yelled, "Who do you think allowed you to live in our house all this time, you ungrateful woman?" But in reality, it was me who had been feeding them with my salary. "You've been living off my paycheck all this time, haven't you? I cooked, did laundry, cleaned everything. I won't be fooled anymore. Maybe before you scold me, you should think about how you're going to survive from now on." With that, it seemed reality finally hit my mother-in-law. She stammered, words escaping her as she broke down. Soon after, the police arrived due to my call and took Kyle away. During the investigation, he apparently admitted to his crime without any resistance. A few weeks after my discharge from the hospital, I immediately visited a law firm. I successfully divorced Kyle and managed to get a lump sum as compensation for the harm. I was advised to change both my workplace and residence for safety, so I got a new job at an accounting firm run by a colleague of Mr. Johnson. My mother and I moved near this new workplace. I never dreamed I'd be caught up with such a weird man and be brainwashed. But it's an experience nonetheless. I vow to be strong and not let anyone manipulate me like that again, to truly live my life for myself. You cheated again. Let's just end this after 4 years, non-particularly long time. Finally, I mustered the courage to ask for a divorce. Even my in-laws sided with me, expressing their harsh opinions to Sam. Frustration crossed Sam's face, veins popping in his temples. But soon enough, he smirked and said, "Fine, I'll give you the divorce, but there are conditions." "I don't care about your conditions. All I know is I'm not planning on being your wife any longer," I responded firmly. "Then take my parents and our 2 brats with you when you leave. Haha. No alimony or child support either," Sam continued with a mocking smile. "You know, being cheated on is also the fault of the person being cheated on. I've grown tired of seeing your gloomy face. Plus, the image of a good-looking divorce is attractive to women, right? Not bad, right?" It seemed Sam didn't take my words seriously. I decided to show him a picture of my new place. "I'm Savannah Taylor, 28 years old, a mother of 3-year-old twin girls. My husband Sam, 32, 4 years older, works in sales for a trading company. We've been married for 4 years. During our relationship, I became pregnant, and we quickly tied the knot in what you might call a shotgun wedding. When I first saw Sam visiting my office for business, I found him incredibly attractive. After several work interactions, we became closer, and when he asked to meet outside of work, I was over the moon. That's how great my first impression of Sam was. Tall, slender, but well-built, with a somewhat deep, comforting voice and a face far more handsome than any regular movie star. A few dates later, we became intimate, and before I knew it, I was pregnant. When I hesitantly told Sam about the pregnancy, he was overjoyed and proposed. I was ecstatic, feeling like the heroine of a fairy tale destined for a happy ending. But living with him revealed a different story. Instead of a fairy tale ending, I found myself in a soap opera with a philandering husband. Sam indeed looks good and knows how to treat women. I mistook that for him being a gentleman and believed he truly cherished me. I also believed his swift marriage proposal was a testament to his love. However, it was just a convenient plaything for him. Oblivious to Sam's true intentions, I followed his lead and soon moved in with his parents. I can't leave you alone in that condition while I'm at work. Since you have no family to return to, why don't you live with my parents? That's what I'd prefer, Sam suggested. With no family of my own to turn to, I had no reason to refuse, and deceived by those words, I ended up living with Sam's parents at their family home. Luckily, Sam's parents turned out to be wonderful people. If they had been the worst sort of in-laws, like something out of a dramatic comic strip, I would have lost hope in life a long time ago. Don't worry about the bills. I'm a top-notch salesman. I make more than enough to support you and the kids. So I'd like you to quit your job and comfortably have our children, Sam insisted. When Sam found out the new life inside of me was twins, he suggested I leave my job. Despite my love for my job and attachment to the company I'd been with since college, I hesitated. However, with the anxieties of giving birth for the first time and to twins, I eventually left my job, heeding Sam's advice. On the surface, I was able to embrace motherhood as if I were the protagonist of a fairy tale with a happy ending. Both my in-laws were overjoyed with the twin girls, and those times felt truly blissful, like a picture-perfect happiness. I believed I had a life filled with nothing but joy. As time went by, and I basked in that happiness, Sam began coming home later and later. Around the time I was getting swamped with taking care of the twins, with the help of my in-laws, Sam's overtime increased, and his weekend shifts grew. It's a busy period right now. There will be a lot of expenses for the kids, right? If I refuse the company's requests and get demoted, that'll be a huge issue. Please lean on my parents and get through this. I'm counting on you, Sam said, placing his hands on my shoulders and looking deep into my eyes. Raising twins was harder than I'd ever imagined. Every night, they took turns wanting to be fed. As soon as one was asleep, the other would wake up crying, even if their diapers weren't wet or they weren't hungry. Sometimes they cried just wanting to be held. I was utterly exhausted, and had it not been for my in-laws, I would have been up all day and night caring for the kids, likely collapsing from fatigue. But my in-laws were kind. My father-in-law, who mentioned that men of his era weren't very involved in child rearing, hesitantly but surely would hold and soothe his granddaughters, telling me to rest when I could. I was truly grateful. In that sense, I felt like the lead of a happy story. However, in this story, the prince, my husband, was notably absent, a fact that left me feeling uneasy. As time passed and life's business took over, I grew accustomed to his absence. But then, one day, I found a note in Sam's bag. It was a love letter from another woman to Sam. The note fervently described how wonderful the times they spent together were and how deeply she loved Sam. "What's this about?" I asked, looking displeased. After glancing at the note, Sam said, "Who the heck would pull a prank like this?" and dismissed it as a bad joke by fluttering the note. "It's just a joke," he insisted. "Can I trust that?" I asked, annoyed. Sam responded, You don't trust me? I've been working my butt off for our family, and this is how you treat me? He got so angry that I hurriedly apologized. At that time, the way he lashed out felt so genuine that I couldn't believe he was lying. Now I understand that Sam lashed out at me to prevent further discussion. But back then, I was scared of angering him and being disliked, since I still believed in him. One day, my in-laws noticed something was off about me. They approached and asked if something was bothering me, and I couldn't hold back any longer. I spilled everything. The moment they heard it, their faces turned pale, and they both apologized profusely. "Savannah, we're so sorry." It might be true. Ha! The truth my in-laws shared with me was shocking. Given his good looks, Sam had always been a ladies' man since high school, often juggling multiple relationships with different girls simultaneously, as if it was the normal thing. Girls like that would often show up at his house, and sometimes they'd even start fighting right in front of him. However, none of these relationships lasted long. My in-laws thought that Sam might just keep playing around and never settle down to get married. When he brought you, Savannah, and told us you were expecting a child, we were over the moon. We thought he had finally settled down. I felt my heart grow cold. I decided to leave my kids with my in-laws and have a serious talk with Sam. Of course, I want to trust you, but there are so many things that just don't add up. For instance, on days he said he had to work on weekends, there were credit card charges from an amusement park. Or when he came home late, claiming it was overtime, he smelled of fresh soap. Looking at it calmly, there were just too many inconsistencies. When I pointed these out and asked for the truth, Sam burst into laughter and said, "You should have just ignored it. If you didn't know, you'd still be happy." I felt like the blood drained from my face. "You're the only one I'm married to. Isn't that enough? Can't you just be satisfied with that?" How was I supposed to answer such a question? Perhaps having said it aloud, Sam, like a dam breaking, began to spill all his true feelings. The reason he married was so that any new girlfriend would know, and thus wouldn't press him for marriage. He probably thought I was easy to manipulate because I had no parents or relatives. Once he made me quit my job, I'd lose my financial independence and would have to listen to whatever he said. I fell right into Sam's trap. Just a convenient woman for him. So, if you don't want a divorce, don't complain from now on. Got it? I couldn't say a word. I just hung my head in front of Sam's loud laughter. It hurt. After that, Sam didn't hide anything he was doing to me and my in-laws. He just said, "If you have complaints, leave." My in-laws seemed to want to believe in their son, but by this point, Sam had become so uncontrollable that it seemed impossible to rein him in. I'd almost gave up. Like Sam said, with twins and no job, I had no way to make a living. I thought about suing Sam for infidelity, but considering the hassle, effort, and money, I just couldn't. If I just let Sam have his way, I could at least survive. Maybe I should pretend everything's fine and deceive myself that he's a good husband. But it was my in-laws who changed my mind. My in-laws made me an offer, and I accepted it. From that day, with the help of my in-laws, I worked hard for 3 years. Another affair. I want a divorce now. After only 4 years of marriage, I finally asked for a divorce. My in-laws sided with me and confronted Sam. Sam seemed irritated, but then smirked and said, "Fine, I'll give you the divorce, but there's a condition. I'll meet any condition. I just don't want to be married to you anymore." I responded, handing him the filled-out divorce papers. Sam seemed surprised. "Then take my parents and the 2 brats and get out. No alimony or child support." Ha ha. Sam continued with a sarcastic smirk. "Being cheated on, the victim is to blame too. I'm tired of seeing your pitiful face. Besides, a handsome divorced man is attractive to women, right? Not too shabby." It seemed Sam still didn't take my words seriously. He probably thinks I'm just going to sit back and do as I'm told. Sam took his time signing the divorce papers, showing off to me. Then, like a boomerang, he tossed them at my feet. I calmly picked them up and checked. They were properly filled out. "If you're going to side with that woman, then you can get lost with her. Sam smugly said, even to his own parents. Is that really how a father should act? My father-in-law quivered as he responded, You know, I could have kids any time I want. I don't need them. I won't miss anything without them. Sam spewed those unbelievable words. Savannah, I'm so sorry. We raised such a person. It's our fault. My mother-in-law said, tears in her eyes, looking sincerely apologetic. It's best to just end it now and leave. Sam watched us discuss this, looking rather entertained. The next day, while Sam was at work, I left the house with the kids and my in-laws. I also filed the divorce papers. Everything went as planned. Sam, who rarely came home, hadn't noticed, but nearly everything was gone from the rooms except his bedroom. When he did come home, he only showed his face to the neighbors, probably to avoid gossip. I guess he didn't care how the house looked. We had already secured a new place and were gradually moving our stuff there. On the day of executing the plan, I had tidied up enough so that Sam wouldn't notice. What was left were just old furniture and junk, things we wouldn't really miss. There was no word from Sam the next day either. He might not have believed that we really left, or perhaps he thought it was just some kind of punishment. Well, either way, he's someone I no longer have any ties to. I don't plan on caring about him anymore. The call from Sam came a week later. Hey, where are you? Why is the house empty? Sam seemed to have finally noticed that almost everything was gone. I don't know what he thinks about us being gone, but he was definitely angry about the missing items and called my cell. Well, I took what I needed and I got rid of what I didn't. I left everything you need for your daily life, though. Yes, I left enough for Sam to live, dishes, basic necessities like shampoo and body wash for bathing towels, and since a place to sleep is essential, the double bed we used to share remains untouched. Though for a while now, I've been sleeping in the living room with the kids on the sofa. I also left Sam's clothes, some keepsakes, and some non-perishable food like instant noodles in cardboard boxes. With that much, he can probably live on his own for a while. We were a couple once. I've given him at least that much courtesy. What about the TV and appliances? Sam continued questioning. I brought everything necessary for living. Don't mess with me. I bought those with the money I earned. That's true. Sam never let me work, stripping me of financial freedom. But he made sure to give me just enough money so it didn't look bad. Well, whether or not he'd use them again is unknown, right? So I brought them. I sold some things we didn't need, though. What do you mean, that house? My father-in-law sold it, so you're going to have to move out soon, too. What? Sam yelled so loudly that it seemed like he might break his phone. I patiently explained to Sam the house we lived in. It was still under my father-in-law's name, so I was able to sell it without consulting Sam. That's why you better start looking for a new place soon. Notice how I packed your things neatly to make moving easier. You've got to be kidding me, Sam exclaimed. I'm not joking. I have been planning this day with my in-laws. Oh, by the way, expect a call from a lawyer soon for alimony and child support. I told you I'm not going to pay that, and you agreed. I remember you saying that. But I never agreed, did I? Right, I did say anything would be acceptable, but I never agreed to any terms. Also, I'm claiming settlement from all your affair partners. You're out of your mind. I ain't paying that. If you don't want to pay, that's fine. We'll just take it to court, and you can follow the court's orders. By now, Sam seemed to realize I was serious. 3 years ago, when Sam admitted everything and no longer hid his affairs, thinking we would just go along with it, my in-laws made this suggestion. Savannah, find a job. We'll take care of the kids, and once you're able to stand on your own, leave Sam and live with the children. My in-laws told me they'd give me time. Grateful for their support, I started with a part-time job and managed to secure a full-time position over the next 3 years. Sam, who hardly spent any time at home during the day and rarely came home at night, amusingly didn't even notice what I was doing. On the flip side, I made this proposition to my in-laws. Let's leave this house together and live as one family. What do you say? At first, they hesitated, but after several conversations, my father-in-law decided to sell the house so we could live together. From there, we started to piece together a more detailed plan, sell the house, use the money to buy a new one, and move in together. Me, the kids, and my in-laws. Sam was earning a decent salary, and I intended to claim alimony and child support without any hesitation. Of course, I knew Sam would refuse, but I had tons of evidence. Over those 3 years, I've been collecting proof. I don't know if you're aware, but I can claim emotional damages from infidelity. I sent claims to all of the individuals you've been involved with since we got married. It's a hefty amount. On the other end of the line, Sam was silent, listening to my words. If you refuse to pay, I'll contact your employer and garnish your wages. If you don't want that, then you better pay up. Oh, and be sure to let me know where you move. Otherwise, I'll have to contact your workplace. Sam didn't respond. Perhaps he was stunned. Well, whether I get a reply or not, I intend to get what's owed to me. Suddenly, I heard Sam's voice. What? Why don't we give it another shot? Excuse me? I was taken aback by the sudden suggestion. Come on, it'll be good, right? He continued in a sweet voice. We're still married, ain't we? Don't be so cold, come on. Seems like Sam thinks he can win me over with sweet talk. I'm sorry, but we're not married anymore. I've already filed for divorce. Why don't we just get remarried then? Sam said without hesitation. It's better for the kids to have both parents together, right? Doesn't he remember saying that he could have as many kids as he wanted? Absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry, but those kids are mine alone. Why don't you just have new kids with someone else? With that, I hung up the phone. Later on, I received numerous contacts from the women Sam cheated with after my lawyer sent them notices. Some were married, and those were keen to pay up so their husbands wouldn't find out. Each woman paid surprisingly easily. It pays off to hire a lawyer experienced in infidelity and divorce cases. There were just so many of them. I didn't ask for a large sum from each of them, but altogether, it amounted to enough to comfortably put my kids through college. Sam tried to reach out several times, but he was always trying to win me back. Respond to the lawyer's notice first instead of this. Don't be so cold. Come on, he pleaded desperately, trying to get through to me. Then, out of the blue, he said, Hey, where are you living now? Don't you want to come back? You still can, you know. Just make up your mind and come back. Don't worry about it. I sent him a photo of where I live now, just enough to give an idea of the place, but not revealing the exact location. Is this your new place? Sam was left speechless when he saw the photo. Indeed, the place I'm living in now is what you'd call a high-rise condo. From the glimpse of the blue sky through the room's window, he seemed to guess that I was on a pretty upper floor. Please let me live with you there. No way. With one firm response, I told him, from now on, communicate through the lawyer. Please don't contact me directly anymore. I blocked Sam and got myself a new phone. He shouldn't be able to contact me directly anymore. According to the lawyer, Sam desperately tried to contact me, but of course, the lawyer turned him down for me. Then, when the lawyer sternly demanded alimony and child support payments, warning that if he didn't pay, his wages would be garnished at his company, Sam finally gave in and agreed to pay. Not wanting to deal with him for years, I hadn't paid both in one lump sum. Whether he took out a loan somewhere or had been secretly saving up, I don't know, but I got what was owed to me, so I don't really care either way. Now, right now, I'm working after leaving my kids with my in-laws. Honestly, I've had enough alimony that I wouldn't have to work. But you never know what's going to happen in life. It's always best to have a steady job. Plus, I want to stay connected to society by working. It's the same sales job I had before marriage. I love interacting with people, so I enjoy my work every day. There was a time when Sam told me to quit, and I was just taking care of the kids, feeling isolated from the outside world. Of course, my in-laws were good to me, but still, it feels like people need to be connected to society. While my marriage felt like a descent from heaven to hell, I have to thank Sam for giving me 2 lovely daughters and a chance to call someone my parents again. Speaking of Sam, after I took legal action, he was blamed by women and even confronted at his company. He ended up exposing all his misdeeds. There, he was demoted and transferred from the main office to a smaller branch, let's say in Nebraska. There were women there who seemed attracted to Sam because of his good looks, but of course, rumors of his debts due to the alimony and child support reached them, so nobody seems to be getting close to him now. Either way, he's no longer my concern. I cherish my current family and am moving towards a bright future. I'm truly living the happiest days of my life.